I'd like to call this meeting of the Anchorage Assembly to order. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Clayman.
Here.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Honored to be here.
Mr. Flynn.
Present.
Ms. Johnston. Here. Ms. Osiander. Ms. Drummond. Here. Mr. Birch will be calling in shortly. Mr. Gutierrez.
Here.
Mr. Starr.
Here.
Dr. Selcraig. Here. Mr. Coffey.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Mr. Starr, will you please lead us in the pledge? Okay, we have 3 sets of minutes from our previous meetings.
Minutes of November 3rd.
Would you please
I'm
click in?
trying.
Yeah, we're doing our best.
I can't.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there any objection, or are there any changes to the amendments as presented? Is there any objection to acceptance of the minutes as presented? With that, the minutes of November 3 are approved.
Move to accept the minutes of the special meeting of November 30th.
Are there any changes to the minutes as presented? Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? With that, the minutes of the November 30 meeting are approved.
Move to accept the minutes of the regular meeting of December 1st.
Are there any changes to the meetings as presented? Or sorry, the minutes as presented? Any objection to the minutes as presented? All right. With that, the minutes for December 1 are approved. Mr. Mayor, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple things. First and foremost, I think we all are very much aware and share in the outrage, shock, and anger that we all feel about the shooting of Officer Allen over the weekend. And we're pleased to report that his medical progress is improving, and he's got additional surgeries tomorrow, but for the most part it looks like his prognosis is good for a good full recovery, which is a great thing. And there is some opportunities for the folks to participate in a reward program. I know that the APDEA has set up a fund, and I think people can contribute at KeyBank. And but the good thing is just that it looks like, you know, it will not be life-threatening, and he will have a full recovery. So to him, his family, and himself, we send all of our prayers and thoughts, and I know we all share in that. Secondly, I'm honored today to be able to read a mayoral proclamation for someone that I've known for over 40 years, who's joined us in the audience today, and I think he's actually got an event tonight that represents what he's been doing for the last 40 years. And if I could read this into the record, and then I'll have him come down and I'll present it to him formally, Mr. Chair. But this is a proclamation from the mayor that reads, whereas Charles Chuck White began coaching varsity basketball at East High School in 1965 and continued to through 1999, winning 14 state championships. And whereas Coach White was the varsity basketball coach for the Washington State Eisenhower Cadets from 1999 to 2003, and whereas since 2003, Coach White has coached varsity basketball for the West High School Eagles, winning 3 state championships, and whereas over the course of his career, Coach White has coached over 500 varsity basketball players and enriched the lives of many students, teams, and sports enthusiasts, and whereas students coached by Coach White have gone on to be successful basketball players in college and professional basketball organizations around the nation and indeed the world, and whereas Coach White has coached basketball for 3 generations and more than 4 decades, has achieved 17 state titles at the 4A level, and is Alaska's most famous coach and perhaps the most successful high school coach in the nation. And whereas Coach White achieved his 900th varsity basketball game win on January 8, 2010, it's my pleasure now, therefore, that I, Dan Sullivan, Mayor, do hereby recognize and honor Coach Charles Chuck White for his 45 years of achievements, outstanding service to students, the sport of basketball, and contributions to the community, the state, and the nation. Please join me in a round of applause for Coach White. Come on down, Coach. Your chance to say a word or two if you would like to.
I'd be pretending I can read it. I don't have my reading glasses on, so I thank you very much. It's totally unexpected, and never thought I'd be getting it at West.
We never thought so either, Coach.
Thank you very much.
You betcha.
You'll hold on for a second, Coach. I think Dr. Selkirk has a few words for you.
Coach White, you were a coach at East when I was a student at East, and you were a very young, kind of handsome, and you still are, of course, man that was just an inspiration at East. And, you know, we were always heartbroken that you went to West. I mean, but we'll have to forgive you after all these years, and it's great to have all the wonderful work you've done. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Selkirk. Mr. Coffey.
Well, as a parent of a West High student who played basketball for Coach White, I was delighted that he came over, and I thank you for what you did with my son and for my son. It was a highlight, and we still talk about it. So thanks, Coach, and all the kids you've helped. We really appreciate it as a community.
I hope I helped some. I know I hurt a few, but I hope I helped a lot more than I hurt.
I think so with my boy anyway. Thank you.
Mr. Clayman.
You know, it is a community, and one might suggest that Mayor Sullivan only was willing to give you the award because you came to West. But as a parent of West High children, I actually am very confident that the mayor would be giving you this recognition, even if you were coaching at South Service, Bartlett, Eagle River, Chugiak, or anywhere, because I think we are all just incredibly proud of the efforts you put in with our youth and the example that you give and all the things those kids have learned.
Just the last stop.
Ms. Drummond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. White, I'm so pleased to be able to stand up and give you a hand. My colleague on the school board, Dr. Rita Holthouse, I believe was the person who hired you at East High School, and she made sure to make me follow your career. And I, too, was a West parent and was very happy when you came to the West area and taught kids there. I also know there has been a great deal of immigration of students from one school to another to follow you around the city of Anchorage. And I know you've done
I didn't recruit any of them.
Oh, no, not at all.
Mr. Mayor, another word?
Yes, finally, thank you. And just I wanted to say, you know, for having known Coach White for over 40 years, to be honest, for about the first 20 of those, I didn't like him at all. And this is a guy that was always beating my West High teams. We played City League basketball against each other after I got out of high school, and he was probably one of the best basketball players, if not the best, to ever prowl the hardwoods in the city of Anchorage. So really quite a challenge, both playing against him as a coach and as a player. But after 20 years or so, you start getting some perspective in life, and you realize, you know, what a great thing he's done for so many kids. And so I like you now, Coach.
Well, Mr. Mayor, as a fellow West High alum, I was a little surprised you included the piece about East High in the proclamation, but nevertheless, congratulations, Coach White, and thank you for coming down.
Thank you.
And good luck in the game tonight.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, do you have anything else for your report, or was that it?
No, that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Just two quick items in the chair's report. One, at the request of Mr. Gutierrez, who has been assigned some additional responsibilities. He's stepping down as the chair of the Public Safety Committee, and Mr. Clayman, who has been ably assisting him this past year, will step up and take that responsibility until after the April election. The other thing I wanted to bring to people's attention, the United Way campaign is just about wrapped up for 2009, and we had an emergency cabinet meeting. I volunteer on the campaign cabinet, and the campaign is falling short. It looks like somewhere between $500,000 and $700,000, and that's a lot of money. It's very important to our community. It's very important to what we as a city do. We on the assembly level often appropriate funds to organizations that receive matching funds from the private sector, and so it's important to me personally and to our community to see that campaign succeed. So there's going to be a last push. I'll be participating. I'll be contacting businesses. I may even appear on the radio with some of my political opponents just to show that this is, in fact, a community effort to make our city a better place. So to anybody who's viewing this meeting at home or anybody in the audience who wishes to get involved, please contact United Way of Anchorage. They could use your support now more than ever. And with that, we'll move on to committee reports, and we'll start with Dr. Selkirk.
First, I think people can do the click and pick on their for the United Way with their permanent fund, and that's still something that's out there, and so this is an opportunity to encourage people to do that. The Community and Economic Development Committee is going to be rolling out information on housing and also health in the next 2 months, and so I'll be working with the chairman to set up dates for the public presentation. We've also been connecting with people to talk about doing a work session, a public work session, and also an assembly work session on the kind of broad perspectives on different kind of tax resources that other communities are using just as an educational piece. So I'll be working with Mr. Chair, to get those things scheduled, and it should be probably in the next 2 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Selkirk. And I think Mr. Birch wanted to click in for a moment here. So, Mr. Birch?
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. Birch.
No report.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Drummond?
No report.
Ms. Johnston?
No report.
Mr. Gutierrez?
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a brief report on the audit committee. There hasn't been a meeting because there was no need. But I met with Mr. Raskins and his staff last Friday, and it was basically just touch base with him because of his involvement in in-house audits and the independent audit, and just to talk about sections of the audit committee responsibilities as outlined in the municipal code. And we also discussed the committee's role in terms of the annual independent audit contract. And I plan to contact our clerk, Ms. Grunstein, so that we can talk about, what her office does in terms of managing that contract and the audit committee's role. What I also plan to do is to generate an audit committee work plan based on what's in the code, with some additions and input possibly from Mr. Raskins. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Mr. Clayman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regard to the Public Safety Committee, last Thursday there was a town hall meeting that was kind of sponsored by the Public Safety Committee for purposes of hearing public input on the proposal to have mandatory IDs for all ages. And the proposed ordinance involves only liquor stores, at least as proposed, doesn't include bars and restaurants. I would say somewhere between 15 and 20 people came and testified, and I think 1 or 2 people were not in support of the ordinance. I think the remainder were all strongly in support, and a number of those people urged us to extend it not just to liquor stores but also bars and restaurants, so that anyone that's purchasing alcohol in the community would have to show an ID. That proposed ordinance is before the Assembly on the 19th. Consistent with that, the Public Safety Committee is scheduled to meet tomorrow at noon, and the topic for that meeting will be the mandatory ID checking. So folks that want to hear further discussion will be taking that up at the Public Safety Committee. And I think one of the big questions we will be addressing is, if we're going to pass the ordinance, should it just be to liquor stores, or should we extend it further to bars and restaurants, of which we've heard differing opinions. Anyway, that's the Public Safety Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Clay. Mr. Coffey, on that point?
Yeah, I have a question for the Public Safety Committee Chair. I know the state looked at this some time ago, not too long ago, but someone at the state level looked at it, and they abandoned the effort for a variety of reasons. I understand among them the liability question. And I think, have you made any inquiry of the state or the efforts that were made at that level for that? And have you looked at any questions of liability associated with the adoption of this ordinance?
I will note, but I'm going to let Mr. Gutierrez answer in more detail because I think he's spent more time with it, as he's one of the people introducing the ordinance. I know that what I call the red stripe law, that puts the red stripe on certain driver's licenses when ordered by the judge. My understanding is that as part of that law, the state legislature created a local option for local cities and municipalities and boroughs to enact such an ordinance, but I would defer to Mr. Gutierrez as to the more detailed answers to the questions you raised.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Coffey raises an excellent question, and it is something that has been looked at. There's a legitimate concern, I think, on the part of the alcohol industry that liability for actions someone may take in intentionally violating the law and either using a fake ID or if an ID accidentally slips through, that liability does not rest upon the particular retailer, that all culpability should rest upon the individual who is consciously, intentionally breaking the law and purchasing alcohol when they know they're under a court order not to do so. So that, with that in mind, I had a discussion with Assembly Council, and we are dealing with that. I would expect an S version that will satisfactorily deal with that issue, placing all culpability on the individual and not on the business who's doing the very best they can to stop these people. So,
Thank you. A follow-up question, if I might, Mr. Chairman. The question of preemption arises when the legislature undertakes to regulate, as it does with alcohol, and what they've done with hours, for example, has authorized specifically cities to do that hour regulation. And I hadn't heard of the ordinance the statute that permits the local option that you've just referred to. So if and when that ordinance comes in front of us, I'd like to have an opportunity to see that, because preemption and alcohol regulation is of a concern to me, and I'd hate to have to do something that can't work because we face that kind of an argument. So thank you for that. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey. Dr. Selcraig on that point?
I'd just like to note the 19th is a public hearing. Is that correct? The meeting, when we review this on the 19th, because I got calls from people who were concerned about kind of the lack of information in advance about the public safety meeting, and a couple of people showed up after everybody had gone, and they were disgruntled. So I think just kind of communicating to people that they can come out on the 19th and testify with this real clearly, it'll be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Selcraig. On that point, Mr. Clayman, you want to wrap up?
Yes. One other note that several people have asked questions about that Mr. Coffey did not ask about, and that is to do with what kind of ID is acceptable. Several people raised the concern about, well, what happens if somebody brings a passport or a military ID? And the answer that we discussed at the town hall meeting, and that I've discussed with several folks that have asked, is that I think under full faith and credit, and I think Assembly Council will confirm this in working on the S version, that as long as the person brings a valid ID, we're not going to start saying, oh, it can't be from another state, or it can't be from the federal government or from the military, that any valid ID should suffice, and that should be clear as well for purposes of the liquor stores or the providers not being held liable. I'm not sure it needs to be in the code language. It may be enough to have it in the assembly information. But that's another issue that some of the providers have asked about, Mr. Coffey.
Thank you, Mr. Clayman. Mr. Starr?
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Ms. Osiander?
No.
Mr. Coffey?
Nothing further, thank you, on that one. Or you call on committee reports.
You got it.
Oh, well, I'll take up a fair amount of time on that. Item 21 meets this Thursday, next Thursday, and so on. We have about four items left to go on our agenda. We're dealing with resolutions regarding parking, residential design standards, commercial design standards, and Chapter 14 definitions. It is our goal, and I think most of you have seen the schedule that I put out, that we get all of this stuff done before the elections. I think our last meeting on the topic is either the 3rd or the 13th of April, but at least it gets us to through all of the chapters, all 14 chapters. We won't deal with the Eagle River special plan or others, but at least we'll get through the body of this whole thing and hopefully provisionally be able to address them all. It doesn't appear to be any way we'll get final adoption of it, because then after we've done the provisional stuff, we got to go back and do one last run through all 14 chapters. But at least this body that has worked so hard, and the people that have worked so hard, will be able to put the whole of it in a position where we're ready for the next bunch to final it up. The next thing is the Energy Task Force. The big issue coming in front of us on that is GRETC, G-R-E-T-C, which is an acronym for Greater Rail Belt Energy and Transmission Corporation, which is a state plan brought to us by the Alaska Energy Authority to create an entity which is to involve all 6 utilities in the rail belt from Golden Valley Electric down to Homer. There's a lot of debate going on over whether or not ML&P should participate. Chugach and MEA have all said that this is a great idea, and there's a lot of debate over how this thing can be structured and so on and so forth. The task force is having a meeting on the 20th of this month from 9 to 11 in the mayor's conference room, specifically on the Gretzky legislation. So anybody who's interested in that should come down. Finally, I'm on the chronic public inebriate leadership team that the mayor has put together. This is a very concerted effort to address this problem. The first sort of solution of what will have to be a many-faceted solution, I hate to use the word solution, a many-faceted approach to addressing the problem of the chronic public inebriate is one we've looked at first and most is the housing first. There are other facets and other aspects because it is a very complex and difficult problem. The task forces or the leadership team is going to be charged with looking not only at housing first and the things that we're doing now, but also these other aspects that how they may very well be dealt with. I think this will go on for some time yet with perhaps interim approaches to handling the problem being implemented or being rejected, and then others coming to the forward and being discussed and reviewed and presented and so on down the line. But at least from my perspective, after a very long time of concern about this problem, we are trying to address it. The mayor has probably got 30, 35 folks plus a group of another 20 or 30 that come to every meeting working very diligently on this, and it's a wide spectrum of people. So hopefully the answers that come out of it will be ones that will allow us to address the problems of the deaths of people, like we've had 14 this year, allow us to claim back our public spaces from people who, use them for camps and so on and so forth, and afford an opportunity for some of these very ill people to get well and to recover from their addiction. So hopefully I'll be able to give you encouraging news over the remainder of my term, and hopefully I'll be able to continue to work on it as we go forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I had.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey. Ms. Osiander, one of those points?
I didn't hear you.
It's because he was talking to me, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I did want to chime in on the Title 21 to, I guess, amplify a little bit or clarify Mr. Coffey's remarks. We won't be completely done by the election. There is a working group in Chugiak Eagle River on the separate chapter there. It's probably a third to possibly a half done, so it will probably come to the Assembly, my guess would be the fall. So we're not at closure yet, but there's work going on. So thank you.
Thank you for that update, Ms. Osiander. Okay, with that, we are at the addendum to the agenda. We have several items, and I'll read them into the record. First, I need a motion to
incorporate.
Thank you. All right. Now I'll read them into the record. Item 9, Bravo 5, Resolution AR 2010-8, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $100,000 from the Ben Boeke Capital Reserve account to the Maintenance and Operations Department, Anchorage Parks and Recreation Service Area, CIP Fund 461, as a match to a grant from the State of Alaska, DMVA, Homeland Security and Emergency Management, for the Ben Boeke Seismic Retrofit Project. Item 9 Delta 23, Assembly Memorandum 33-2010, an appellant's request to convene the Bidding Review Board protesting a reward on a request for proposal number 29P034 to provide management, financial, and accounting services for the Port of Anchorage. Item 9, Foxtrot 6, Ordinance AO 2010-3, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code Chapters 2135 and 2140 to allow severe alcohol-dependent housing, amending Title 21-45-080 to add parking requirements, and a new section to 21-5510 providing conditional use standards for severe alcoholic dependent housing, sponsored by myself and Mr. Coffey. 9 Foxtrot 7, Resolution AR 2010-9, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $8,564,613 of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009 funding through the State of Alaska Department of Commerce, Community and Economic Development to the State Direct Federal Pass-Through Fund 231 for reimbursement of fuel, insurance, utilities, and rentals. Finally, I would note item 13C2, we have an S1 version on the addendum that will be moved when we get to that item. And Mr. Gutierrez, I'm sorry, we need to mention a couple of public hearing dates. For 9 Foxtrot 6, that'll be February 16, and for 9 Foxtrot 7, that'll be February 2. Now, Mr. Gutierrez, could you move the late on the table item, please?
A move to introduce or a move to approve?
Move to introduce.
The move to introduce AR 2010-18.
Thank you. That'll be item 9 Alpha 1, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing the value of the Pick, Click, and Give campaign. Are there any further additions to the agenda?
By introduction, Mr. Chairman, do you mean incorporate into the addendum and then we can pull it if we need to?
Correct.
Thank you.
Is there any objection to incorporating those items into the agenda?
Other question, Mr. Chairman, will there be a number on AR 2010-18?
That was 9 Alpha 1.
Thank you very much.
Seeing no objection, those items are incorporated. All right, now we'll start pulling. Mr. Coffey, you want to go first?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, item, for purposes of declaring a potential conflict of interest in making a disclosure, 9D12 as to Park Lanes, 9D15 as to Casa Grande, and 9D16 as to Glacier Brewhouse and Orso, all of whom are, I have some interest which I need to describe when the time comes. And that's it for me.
Thank you, and I apologize. I should have asked for a motion to approve the addendum first.
Moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. Okay, Ms. Osiander, we'll continue with you. Thank you. Mr. Starr? Mr. Clayman?
Thank you. 9 Delta 23 from the addendum.
Thank you, Mr. Clayman. Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 9 Apple 1 from the laid on the table item.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. Mr. Gutierrez?
No items, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Johnston?
No items, thank you.
Ms. Drummond?
No items, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Selkrig?
9F1, 11A.
We're not going to,
Okay.
just
Right,
the 9
okay,
right now.
Thank you.
Anything else? 9F11, was it? Or 9F1, rather?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Birch? Thank you very much, Mr. Birch. I'll review real quickly to make sure we got them all. From the regular agenda, items 9 Delta 12, 9 Delta 15, 9 Delta 16. From the addendum, 9 Delta 23, and from the later on the table items, 9 Alpha 1. Did I miss any? Oh, sorry, and 9 Foxtrot 1. Did I miss any? All right. Is there any objection to adoption of the items that were not pulled? All right, those items are approved. We just had several people appointed to various boards and commissions. If you are among them and in the audience, please come on down, tell us what we appointed you to, and tell us who you are. Don't look scared, it's okay.
Ann Stevens Denny, Park Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you very much, Ms. Denny. Thank you for coming down.
Bruce Webb, Board of Adjustments.
Thank you, sir.
Timothy Hall, MLMP Board of Directors.
Tough job. Welcome aboard, sir.
Jeremiah Dunham, Health and Human Services.
Welcome aboard. Thank you for your service.
Greg Grinwig, Police Fire and Medical Trust.
Welcome. Thank you.
Greg Stewart, Police and Fire Retirement Medical Board.
Welcome, sir.
Tom Tiber, Urban Design Commission.
Thank you very much for your service, sir.
David Nikolai, Public Facilities Advisory Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Nikolai. Thank you for coming down.
Yeah, Captain Bob Pulowski to the Watershed and Natural Resources Advisory Commission.
Captain Pulaski, thank you for coming down.
Cassie Atwell, Anchorage Women's Commission.
Thank you for your service.
Don Winchester, Board Review.
Thank you, Mr. Winchester.
Good evening, Bob Shake, Board Review.
Thank you, Mr. Shake.
Mary Rosenzweig, Women's Commission.
Not too painful, right? Thank you for coming down.
I'm Clayton Walker from the Cemetery Board.
Mr. Walker, thank you. Thank you very much, all of you, for your volunteering your service. We appreciate it. It means a lot to us.
Mr. Chair.
Ms. Drummond.
I'd like to point out that the folks listed under items 11A, B, and C have not yet been appointed, as we have not taken up those items yet.
Correct.
Okay, but some of them did come forward and introduce themselves. So tell them to stick around in case we have questions.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Ms. Drummond. I appreciate that. Okay. Since Mr. Coffey declared a potential conflict of interest on item 9 Delta 12. Would someone else please move? Oh, we'll start with 9 Alpha 1, actually.
Thank you.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Move to introduce.
Approve, actually.
I don't know what I was thinking. Move to approve.
Second.
AR 2010-18.
Thank you. Is there any objection to approval of item 9 Alpha 1? Seeing and hearing no objection, that item is approved.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, we do have some people here from the Rasmussen Foundation that and other participants that have helped the Pick, Click, and Give program. If they wouldn't mind coming to the microphone, we could give them a little more recognition.
You anticipated my question, sir. If you're from the Rasmussen Foundation or supporting this effort, would you please come down to the podium? Ms. Gray Jackson will present this to you. Oh, you're reading? Okay. This claim is presenting. Very good. All right.
Welcome.
Thank you.
AR 2010-18, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly recognizing the value of a Pick, Click, Give campaign. Whereas Alaskans can support the causes they cherish by making a safe and secure donation when they file online for their permanent fund dividend. And whereas Pick, Click, Give allows Alaskans to contribute to any of 365 Alaskan charities, nonprofits, community foundations, and university campuses with donations ranging in size from $25 up to the entire dividend. And whereas www.pickclickgive.org is the online source of information for Alaskans eager to participate in this exciting program. And whereas the PFD division began accepting applications for the 2010 PFD on January 1st, and the last day to apply is March 31st. And whereas citizens can learn about the difference a $25 donation can make at www.pickclickgive.org, where nonprofits have posted stories and digital videos highlighting the good work accomplished thanks to donations from 2009. And whereas the spirit of giving and generosity is alive and well in the municipality of Anchorage. Now and therefore, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly hereby resolves that Pick, Click, Give is recognized for its positive impact on our community and for its innovative approach to increasing participation in charitable giving within the municipality of Anchorage and the entire state.
Thank you.
Ms. Wolf?
Thank you. So I'm Lori Wolf. I'm with the 4-Acre Group, and I'm joined here by members of the Rasmussen Foundation, ConocoPhillips, BP, who else is with me? The Maryland Agency, and organizations that are recipients of Pick, Click, Give, including Catholic Social Services and the Food Bank and the Red Cross. So on behalf of all of us, we'd just like to say thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Assembly. We're thrilled to be able to provide this opportunity, and we're so happy to be in partnership with the state to make this a possibility.
Thank you, and thank you for all you do. Mr. Mayor, you have a...
Well, just if they could kind of highlight last year's statistics, because they were pretty amazing what the community around the state was able to do to help, and it's good numbers to incentivize people out there with.
Sure. So last year was the first year of a 3-year program. We hope to have the program instilled in the legislature this year, but in the first year we got a 2% response from all of Alaskans, which we think for a program that was brand new was pretty great. And they raised $500,000 for 333 organizations across the state of Alaska, plus all the campuses of the University of Alaska. So this year we're at 365 plus all the campuses, and next year we hope to grow even more. And already we're at a 2% response just today. So and that number keeps growing every day. So
you'd be at 2.01 if it worked when I tried. I'll get to it later.
We did experience some technical difficulties with the state this year. They have assured us there will be a remedy to that solution, and all Alaskans who want to Pick, Click, and Give this year will be given the opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. All right. With that, we're at item 9 Delta 12. Could I have somebody else move besides
Move
Mr.
to
Coffey?
approve.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Thank you, Ms. Osiander. Mr. Coffey.
Mr. Chairman, this is a renewal of a beverage dispensary license. I represent a gentleman who is buying that license after renewal takes place. So he is interested in having it renewed.
That counts. You're out.
And that's what I figured.
And that was the Park Lane?
Lanes
Okay.
only.
So for purposes of beverage dispensary license number 133, Mr. Coffey is excused from participating and will be shown as an abstention. Are there any other objections or questions regarding these license renewals? Hearing and seeing none, is there any objection to these renewals? Okay, those renewals are approved. Moving on to 9 Delta 15.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson. Mr. Coffey.
Mr. Chairman, if you read that package, you will note that the person who filed the renewal on that license application was me. This was a former tenant of mine. They went broke, and they did not file the renewal. I filed the renewal. I hold a financial interest in the liquor license. That's about as direct a conflict as you can have. That's all I have to tell you about that one.
You're 2 for 2, Mr. Coffey.
Thank you.
You were excused from participating in beverage dispensary license 3009. With that, are there any further questions regarding this renewal? Are there any objections to this renewal? Hearing and seeing none, that item is approved. Moving on to 9 Delta 16.
To approve.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson. Mr. Coffey.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Assembly, I have been the attorney for Glacier Brewhouse and Orso's Restaurant since they were started. I continue to provide legal services to them. They are my clients, therefore I probably have a conflict, and I am disclosing it.
You're hitting that one out of the park, Mr. Coffey. 3 for 3. You are excused from participating in the renewals for license number 3978 and 4012.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
With that, are there any further questions regarding these renewals? Couldn't help but notice that Jade Johnston is associated with the Glacier Brewhouse. Oh, no? Okay, just making sure. Are there any objections to those renewals? Seeing and hearing none, those items are approved. We are moving along to 9 Foxtrot 1, I believe. Sorry, I missed 23. Thank you. Mr. Clayman. Where'd he go? Mr. Clayman. All right. Mr. Gutierrez, you move that on his behalf.
I'll move to approve on his behalf.
Second.
All right. I think we probably want to start with hearing from the administration on this item. Go ahead, Ms. Osiander.
Before we do, the appellant here, or the person who's protesting, has asked that this be delayed 1 week. Mm-hmm. So I'd like that to be the first question that they answer.
Okay.
Because they could not be here.
Right. No, I got the same email. Thank you, Ms. Osiander. We will ask the administration to answer that as they are answering other questions. So with that, Mr. Michaelis, who do you want?
Yes, our CFO will be answering that question.
All right. Ms. Mahoney.
Our goal in terms of hiring AKT is to minimize overtime in preparing our CAFR report. And we're right up to the deadline right now in terms of meeting the requirements for the audit. Delay of 1 week would be very difficult for us to do, but we will do it, understanding, though, that we may increase some of our overtime labor costs in order to meet our deadlines.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Michaelis, did you want to have somebody address the underlying issue prior to us discussing a delay?
Yes, our purchasing director can do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to give you a brief overview of events.
Sir, would you kindly identify yourself for the record?
I'm the acting purchasing officer. My name is Fred Kaltenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Kaltenbach.
I've been with the city about 21 years.
So a few people know you, right?
We, the purchasing department, issued a request for proposal seeking proposals for general accounting services to assist the port in preparing for the scheduled audit, which is to begin on March 22nd. Proposals were received on November 13th. Evaluations were performed by a committee of 4. The successful proposer that was selected is AKT, a limited liability partnership. They were selected unanimously by all 4 proposers. The evaluation committee recommended award to AKT. As the highest-ranked proposer, the purchasing department in turn determined that AKT was a responsible proposer and processed the notification to unsuccessful proposers, providing a 7-day notice as required by Anchorage Municipal Code. On the 7th day, Mr. John P. Johns, one of the proposers, requested a copy of AKT's proposal, and we extended the time frame, allowing him time to review that, and he subsequently submitted a protest of the award. Mr. Johns submitted a protest of award alleging AKT LLP was not properly licensed in the state of Alaska, and that one individual identified in AKT's proposal was improperly identified as a certified public accountant. Mr. Malden, the purchasing officer, denied the protest, as AKT LLP was and remains properly licensed in the state of Alaska, and the identification of one individual as a CPA was considered immaterial to the evaluation of the proposal and the attended award for general accounting services. Mr. Johns subsequently requested reconsideration as he alleged the purchasing officer's reason for denial was flawed. Upon receipt of that reconsideration, a request to have the mayor waive as an irregularity the administrative error made by AKT in identifying a Mr. Uhlenkott as a CPA was processed and approved pursuant to Anchorage Municipal Code Section 720.050. This was processed to officially determine this clerical error as immaterial to the evaluation and award of this project. Prior to the purchasing department's ability to respond to Mr. Johns in writing, he submitted a request that his protest be referred to the Municipal Assembly for the purpose of convening the bidding review board to hear his protest. Subsequent to that, we've issued this AM requesting that the Assembly deny that protest due to the essential services necessary to complete the audit.
Thank you very much, sir. Ms. Osiander?
Excuse me. My primary concern about this is the inability of the gentleman who's protesting to be present. He had email correspondence with me and, I guess, Mr. Flynn, I don't know if any other Assembly members, and said that he was not, several of us said, he said that he was not, he's a gentleman who's in Juneau, and he said that he was not informed that it was going to be dealt with on this agenda until it's either yesterday or the day before. And so he requested the 19th. I'd like just to have a little bit more discussion about the deadlines that the administration would face. I understand that if it goes to the bidding board, you're going to have problems. If the Assembly deals with this on the 19th, that's 1 week delay. That still seems mid-January. What's the deadline that you're under? Could you be more specific regarding the completion deadline for the audit?
Yes. In regard to completing the CAFR, according to our bond rating agencies and in having it all out, we have to have it complete by the end of July. The particular financial statements that we were going to hire AKT to do was for the port standalone financial statements.
Right.
We wanted to issue those at the same time. If we delay bringing these accountants in to help us prepare those, we'll still be able to issue the CAFR on time, but we won't be able to issue the standalone financial statements for the port. Most likely, we would end up having to wait until August because we would end up using a different set of resources to proceed with this. It puts us in a difficult situation. We have contacted our bond counsel to determine, really what would the negative impact be as a result of delaying those standalone financial statements, and we did not have an answer by today.
Okay. I'm going to move to postpone this for one meeting.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Selkirk. Mr. Klayman, you're in the queue.
I had a follow-up question for the Chief Financial Officer. Ms. Mahoney, I completely understand that if this goes to the Bidding Review Board and that's a 2 or 3 month process, that makes it impossible for this particular standalone audit to be done in time for the July deadline. But I guess I'm a little bit confused if they're delayed just by 1 week while we look this up, we let this guy show up and, I mean, I don't know what we'll decide, but let's say we don't send it to the Bid Review Board, but we approve it in 1 week from tonight. Is that really going to delay your process, or will you be able to still get it done, or will they be able to get it done by July? Again, not saying how, but I'm just wondering if all we delay it is a week, is that really going to hamstring your process?
A 1 week delay, we will make it work.
Okay.
I mean, we may, like I said, we may incur a little bit of overtime on the part of our staff, but we will make it work.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klayman. Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a sort of a broad question, not really directed to any particular individual, but on the point of delay, I haven't seen the gentleman's email, so maybe an assembly member who has might want to chime in. Does he have any evidence, any argument, in addition to what he's already presented, which I think the administration has done a good job dealing with and informing us of here? If he doesn't have anything new, if he doesn't have anything additional, then I don't know that we're served at all by spending that extra week and putting this project behind. Anyone who wants to address that, feel free. Or if not, that's fine too.
Mr. Kaltenbach, did you want to offer?
Yes, through the chair. There is one other element that he has brought up in his protest and his request for reconsideration, and that has to do with the financial aspect, the cost of the services. AKT has basically proposed a cost not to exceed $50,000. That is based upon varying hourly rates based upon the 4 individuals that would be working on the project. They are a local firm. Mr. Uhlenkott has proposed a cost of $120 an hour, which is basically averages out to about half of the hourly rate of AKT. He's also estimated the services at 400 hours.
I think you misspoke, sir. You mean Mr. Kaltenbach? Or Mr. Johns? You said
I'm sorry, Mr. Johns.
Thank you.
Proposed $120 an hour for 400 hours. He has not addressed his cost relating to transportation. He is part-time in Juneau, part-time in California, where his home is. So there's other cost to be considered that is not a part of his proposal. But he has challenged the municipality in that we are paying more for these services. If you do the math, $120 an hour times 400 hours is $48,000 versus a not-to-exceed amount of $50,000. We don't consider that a great amount. Again, this is a request for proposal. There are multiple evaluation factors, such as experience, past performance, location, availability. Cost was one element, about 20% of the evaluation, I believe. And Mr. Johns did receive a higher score in cost, and I have informed him of that. That did not satisfy him. He still thinks that we're wasting money. So if we follow the RFP process, cost was considered, it was evaluated, Mr. Johns received a higher score. AKT still wins this proposal hands down.
Thank you, Mr. Kaltenbach. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all.
Thank you. Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll pass.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gutierrez brought up the salient point here is there really is no new information to be brought forward, and I think both the legal department and the purchasing department adequately answered every concern Mr. Johns had. I reviewed all that information when I rejected his appeal, and time is of the essence. I mean, we're in a situation where we really don't want to be wasting $10, $1,000, $10,000 if we don't have to, and in this case, I really don't think we have to. I think all of his points have been properly answered and accurately answered.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dr. Selkrig?
I had a few questions. Actually, I did have a question about the cost issue. And Mr. John says that it's that his firm bid $48,000 and that AKT bid $60,000. So are you saying it's $50,000, not $60,000?
AKT was very specific in their proposal as far as the not-to-exceed dollar amount.
Okay.
They had an hourly rate ranging anywhere from $210 to $250 per hour.
But they had the not-to-exceed $50,000 in it.
Correct, and they estimated a not-to-exceed amount of 200 hours.
Thank you. Well, which came first? I mean, how does that, so that not-to-exceed turns out to be, at 200 hours means $50,000? I have to do the math, but is that what it works out to be?
In doing the math, it's difficult to say which individual would be actually doing the work. They gave us a fee for several different individuals, 4 to be working on this particular project, again, ranging from $210 to $250. The lower dollar amount were the accountants going to be actually doing the work, your project manager, your CPA to review the work is a little higher.
So, but the AKT had a not to exceed no matter what. Or are you saying that not to exceed, but there may be a higher cost?
AKT had a not to exceed amount. Regardless of the hours, they said their cost would not exceed $50,000.
Okay. And then my second question is AKT located in Anchorage?
AKT is an international firm, and they do have an active Anchorage office.
Does
Yes.
Mr. Johns have an active Anchorage office?
No, they do not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Klayman?
Mr. Kaltenbach, this question may be one in which you may not be allowed to answer, but my question, Mr. Johns wasn't the first person in the bid list. There were more than two people that bid. I guess my question is, if there was more than 2 people that bid, where did Mr. Johns fall on the list?
Mr. Johns is number 2.
So he would be the next person to get it. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Coffey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My review was not to determine who was right or wrong. My review was to determine whether or not there was a process that answered the complaints that Mr. Johns put forward. They've clearly answered that. Now the question becomes, does it have to go to yet another body with subsequent delays and costs to the municipality to answer for a third time questions that have been answered first by staff and second on appeal? I mean, if we had forever and there weren't attendant costs associated with it, maybe you say, okay, go ahead. The gentleman has submitted a bid, had a review. The questions appear to be appropriately answered. I don't intend to second guess them. I'm not going to either vote to delay this matter for another week, nor am I going to support the idea that we should approve this going to the bidder, the bidding review board. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My memory tells me when I used to be the contract manager for the independent audit that the field work had to be completed by 30 days after the end of the year. And I think that's still the case. The code hasn't changed. And with that said, Mr. Kaltenbach's comments are sufficient enough for me, and I do recognize that moving on and approving this is really of the utmost importance to get the work done that the auditors need to do so that we can get our audited financial statements in a timely manner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Ray Jackson. Ms. Osiander?
I just wanted to clarify my motion. My motion was not to send this to the bidding review board. My motion was strictly that we talk about it and make the decision next week.
Understood. Thank you for that clarification, Ms. Osiander. Mr. Klayman?
Thank you. I appreciate the time we've spent discussing this, and I also think Mr. Coffey's points are very well taken about where is the point at which we start second-guessing a bid review process. And here I think the discussion we've heard from the administration, from the purchasing department shows that they did a very, very careful process in selecting the bids. I'm always reminded in the context of professional services that you can often find somebody that will do the work at half the price, but it takes twice as long to get the work done, and sometimes the person who charges a bit more actually not only gets the work done faster, but a whole lot faster, and it ends up costing less. I have great confidence in our purchasing department. The acting director has only been with us 21 years. And that's a reminder of the vast experience. We had a purchasing director retire, much to our great disappointment, but the fact that we've got 21 years of experience stepping in gives me confidence that this was done properly, that the company that was awarded this was the right choice, and that a bidding review process, I don't think this is a kind of case where we should be asking the bidding review board to get involved. So I think that while originally I was supportive of putting it off for a week, I think we might as well save money where we can. I don't think the review will change anything, so I will be voting no on this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Klayman. Dr. Selcraig.
I'm not going to be supporting this motion. It seems to me that there was a thorough review. It seems to me these bids came in very close, and that there were other issues being considered and given points to that clearly resulted in Mr. John coming in second. And consequently, I'll be voting to, I'm not going to be supporting the proposal to postpone this for a week.
Thank you, Dr. Selcraig. Seeing no one else in the queue, let's please proceed to vote on the motion of whether to delay consideration of this item for 1 week. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll have to do this by voice because we need Mr. Birch to participate. So,
Mr. Klayman?
No.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
No.
Mr. Flynn?
no.
Ms. Johnston? No. Ms. Osiander?
No.
Ms. Drummond?
No.
Mr. Birch? Mr. Gutierrez?
No.
Mr. Starr?
No.
Dr. Selcraig?
No.
Mr. Coffey?
No.
Mr. Chair, it's unanimous.
All right. With that, the motion before us, I believe, is to refer this to the bid review board. Is there anybody, given what we've heard, who supports that motion?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I thought the motion was to approve.
That's correct. And
not to send it to the bidding review board.
Oh, that is correct. It says to deny the protest and deny the referral.
Sir.
Thank you very much for that. So the motion before us is to deny the referral to the bidding review board. Is there anybody who opposes that at this time? Or any further comments on that point? All right. Seeing and hearing.
Mr. Chairman, do you need a motion?
We already had a motion.
Okay.
Yeah.
With the continuing, before the continuing. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, seeing and hearing no objection, that motion is approved. And that brings us to the final item on our consent agenda, 9 Foxtrot 1. Dr. Selcraig?
I pulled this because I move to approve.
I mean, motion to introduce, actually.
Move to introduce.
Second.
Third.
I pulled this because I thought we should have a little bit of discussion about it. It seems to me that board members give a great deal of their time and energy.
Order?
Yeah.
Oh.
Go ahead, Ms. Osiander, your point.
I'm sorry, this is just for introduction.
Thank you.
And at this point, thank you.
Okay. Was there anything else, Dr. Selcraig, you want to
No.
continue? Okay. All right. With that, is there any objection to the introduction of item 9 Foxtrot 1? Okay. Seeing and hearing that no one, the item is introduced, and we move right along. Oh, yes, the public hearing on 9 Foxtrot 1 will be February 2nd, our first meeting in February. And that concludes our consent agenda in almost record time. And we can move directly into old business. First item is item 11A. That was Mr. Tibor's appointment to the Urban Design Commission. The public hearing on that item is now open. Is there anybody who wishes to comment on this matter? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing on that item is closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion has been moved and seconded. Is there any objection to the motion?
I just wanted to have some discussion.
Okay.
The Urban Design Commission is an important commission in terms of determining actual design, architecture, and the physical landscape of our community. And I guess when I looked at this resume, I found it difficult to understand And I'm sure that this gentleman is a really good person and is willing to serve, and I don't want to be rude and not appreciative. But it would seem to me that commissions like this commission should call upon people who have expertise or an experience in dealing with urban design, architecture, construction. And it just seemed to me that the resume presented didn't really reflect the appropriate skills for this commission. And I as a result, I'm not going to be supporting it. And that isn't to say I don't greatly appreciate Mr. Tabor's willingness to serve, but it seems to me that there may be a more appropriate commission for him to be serving on, and that this commission really deserves to have an appointee who has some experience in the field of community development in some way, whether it's being a developer, being a person that's engaged in actually constructing the community.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Selkirk. Ms. Osiander.
I'd like to counter that with a little bit different perspective. The Urban Design Commission actually has been fairly controversial in terms of businesses that it has regulated and plans that it has regulated, because there was a view that they weren't connected with the costs involved with some of the mandates that they laid on people and on businesses. And as such, I think this gentleman appears to have a very comprehensive experience with just basic business. He's done a variety of things and has a strong educational background in business. And as such, I think it might be a benefit to the Commission to balance them a little bit and bring them back to the sense that, yes, we appreciate specific urban design components, but we also realize that they have a specific impact on business costs. So as such, I'm going to be supportive.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander. Mr. Vacalis?
Yes, thank you. As the Assembly knows, these boards and commissions outline certain seats and qualifications for the different type of boards. This particular seat is a public at large. Mm-hmm. It's a public seat. The other seats that require for special qualifications, obviously we would fill them in that manner. This is a public at large. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vacalis. Dr. Selkirk.
With that information, I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any further comments, or is there any objection to this appointment? Seeing here none, that appointment is approved. We're on to item 11B, Zone Board of Examiners and Appeals. And,
Move to approve.
We actually, we need a public hearing on that one, so we'll open the public hearing on that. Is there anybody who wishes to comment on this appointment? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander. Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Is there an objection to this appointment? Seeing and hearing none, welcome aboard, Ms. Denny. And next up is item 11C, Mr. Webb. I'd like to open the public hearings. Anyone like to comment on this appointment? Seeing and hearing no one, that public hearing is closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander. Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Is there any objection to the appointment? Maybe a button for Ms. Johnston. Seeing and hearing no objection, that item is approved. Item 11D, the legislative program. We don't need a public hearing on this one, right? No, we don't. Okay. So what is the wish of the body regarding the legislative program?
Move to approve.
Isn't this this is completed public hearings? Or
we don't have a public hearing on this one. This is a consent agenda item.
And why did we have them on the ones immediately before?
Because it was postponed from a previous meeting, so it has to move to old unfinished business.
No, I just didn't understand why we'd have public hearings on board and commission appointments. I know we have a public comment period. I can talk to you off the record.
Good enough. What is the wish of the body with respect to the legislative program, item 11D?
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey. And we'll get those done as soon as the machine comes up. Thank you. And then we have some amendments.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Coffey?
Point of information, was the S version in the motion should specify one or the other, please?
I don't know that there is an S version.
Well, I got a different.
we've had many reiterations, but the resolution approving it has remained the same. It's 289. I don't know that we have a 289S. No, it's different books,
Well, one has
not different resolutions, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Osiander, Mr. Coffey is correct. The resolution has not changed. The substance behind it has.
Yes.
Right, so at some point, then, you're going to need a motion to adopt the one book versus the other one.
Correct.
Okay.
And then we'll amend from there.
Okay.
All right?
For clarity then, Mr. Chairman, I would move to adopt, as part of Resolution 2009-289, the proposed Municipality of Anchorage 2010 State Legislative Program presented to the Assembly January 12, 2010, the one we got tonight.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey.
Thanks, Mr. Osander.
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson. I think it was Gray Jackson. Do we have those in, Madam Clerk? Okay. Is there any objection to adopting, this is our acting version?
Well, maybe we better wait for amendments, sir?
As our working document. Is it okay to accept it as our working document?
It's been moved and seconded, so it is.
All right. So with that.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, at your request, I have two amendments to make, if I might.
Please.
They have been handed out. It's up on the upper right-hand corner. It says Agenda Item Number 11D. It's floor amendment to municipalities' 2010 state legislative program for adoption under AR 2009-289. Amendment number 1, which I'm moving at the request of the chair, and it's basically as stated here, and if you want me to read it into the record, I will. It's at page 6, other legislative priorities. Amend the local control subsection to include an additional priority to read as follows. Local control. Oppose legislation that would hinder termination of the IM program in Anchorage. Allow for local decision-making on requiring sprinklers in certain limited or special situation occupancies, and those two are in there, and the amendment is support legislation changing state policy from opt-in to opt-out for school district conducting the at-risk youth behavior survey or substantially similar data collection. The information is necessary for local allocation of resources.
Second.
Mr. Gutierrez is the second. It's not up for him. Here, try that. Mr. Coffey, would you please press the button again?
Yes.
Thank you.
I thought I'm sorry, hit the...
All right. Is there any objection to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, that amendment is approved. Mr. Coffey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amendment number 2 is found in the same document. It's on page 7. It's under the heading of public safety, and it's the underlined section that says, despite a 2002 increase in state alcohol taxes, state funding for alcohol treatment programs has remained flat or declined in the intervening years. And then it goes on to say the municipality therefore requests supports increased funding, which is already in the language. So that just is a clarifying motion.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey. Is there a second to that motion? Thank you, Ms. Johnston. Is there any objection to that amendment? Seeing and hearing none, that amendment is approved. Amendment number 3, Ms. Drummond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That would be at the bottom of the page of amendments, on page 8. Following the Senior Needs Assessment and Area Plan, I move to add local public transit services. Alaska is one of only 2 states not providing operating funds for local public transit service. The municipality of Anchorage supports the establishment of a statewide pool allocated to communities under a formula or ratio based on ridership or some similar standard.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any objection to that amendment? Seeing and hearing none, that amendment is approved. Amendment number 4, Ms. Johnston.
On page 6 of other legislative priorities, a subsection include an additional priority to read as follows. Public safety, Seward Highway turn lane at mile 79 for access to the Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center and Portage Creek.
Second.
Question, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Coffey?
Does the language that's also underlined that says, see page 20, highest priority transportation project, so on and so forth, does that go in here as well? Or just the narrative not in parentheses?
Ms. Johnston?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding this amendment? Is there any objection to this amendment? Seeing and hearing none, that amendment is approved. This is amendment number 5. Dr. Selkrig.
Page 6, other legislative priorities, amend to include an additional priority to read as follows, that the support under behavioral health, support increases in Medicare reimbursement rates, and modify rate funding formulas regulated based on patient load at the local level.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Actually, Dr. Selkrig, could you please make the initial motion? Thank you. Mr. Coffey.
I'm not sure what support increases in Medicaid reimbursement rates is intended to do. My understanding is that's between the state and the feds, and why we certainly would want it. I don't know if it's appropriate for our legislative program.
Well, the state plays a role in it as well, as I understand, and different states have different levels of reimbursement.
I just had whispered in my ear more than half of Medicaid, and I'm not sure what that means, Doctor. So perhaps you could resume your seat and tell me if there's – I don't have a particular problem with it. I'm just curious as to the state gets Medicaid reimbursement, and that's based on a relationship between the states and the federals. And while what we're doing is we urging the state to try to get more money from the feds.
And to also participate in Medicare reimbursements. It's my understanding that states have some flexibility in terms of the amount that they reimburse. I wonder if there's somebody here from the health
That's true. Then there's certainly a local component, which I wasn't aware, and this is pretty new.
And
so we didn't hear about it in our committee work, so that's why I'm
sorry.
asking these
Thank
questions.
you. Well, I got these recommendations from the committee on Friday, and it was complicated because we did this over Christmas, and I wanted to give them an opportunity to comment, so I got them to you as fast as I could.
Are there any further questions about this amendment?
Well, I'd like to hear from the administration about this local component issue, because that's news to me. Diane?
Ms. Engel?
Through the chair, Mr. Coffey, I'm not fully aware of how the Medicaid reimbursement works in this area. I know, so I can't really comment fully. I know that we're talking here about reimbursement not to the city, but to providers of behavioral health services. And I know that for certain Medicaid services, I don't know if this is one of them, the state can do rate setting, and the state can apply to participate in waiver programs that change how the reimbursement structure works. But I personally am not involved enough to really speak intelligently enough about this particular behavioral health component.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, do I still have the floor?
You do.
On this amendment, it came to me here, either Friday or Monday, and part of my problem with it is it's late, and there was no opportunity for the committee to vet this thing and find out what the consequences of this would be. I understand there were other things that were late, but like Ms. Johnston's deal, but that has to do with a road, and we're all kind of familiar with roads. I have no idea what the consequences of our support of Medicaid reimbursement rates would mean to this city. I don't know, and I'm reluctant to deal with something about which I don't know. And so if someone could educate me, perhaps I might be less reluctant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey. Are there further comments?
I'm not an expert on this, and it's not a public hearing. I don't think people from the committee came. They provided me, and there's representatives from Providence. There's a fairly sophisticated group of people that sat on this committee, and this was a recommendation that they asked to be forwarded to us. It is my understanding that the state has some discretion and some power over the level of Medicaid that it makes available to us. When you begin to look at certain payment scales of Alaska as compared to other places, we're not as robust as some places. Now, I'm not an expert, but I would, Thad Witter, I guess I trust this advice, and I think it's worthwhile, and I brought it forward.
Ms. Osiander?
Is there anyone from your group here, Dr. Selkirk, that could help us?
Mr. Coffey? I'm sorry, Ms. Osiander, were you done?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess my question is, Mr. Birch, Mr. Gutierrez, Mr. Flynn, and I have had more than one meeting on the legislative program, and I don't know why they wouldn't have come to us with this and presented it, because then it could have been dealt with, and we could have said, here's why we want this, just like we've said on other things.
I think it was problematic because of the timing. I think that it was introduced in November, that Christmas, I just think that basically this committee didn't convene until after Christmas. And No, this working committee, this health committee. So I think it was... not your committee, but it was problematic in terms of the timing of that committee. And so they met this week, and these are their recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My final remark, and thank you for your tolerance, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to, not because it might not be a very good idea, but because I don't know whether it's a good idea or a bad idea for our city and to support it, I'm not going to do it. Thank you.
Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a lot of faith in the folks that Dr. Selkirk outlined who are involved in that committee, and I would personally think that if they didn't know what they were talking about, they would not have asked you to bring this forward. So I'm happy to support this, Dr. Selkirk.
Okay, I don't see anybody else in the queue, so Madam Clerk, I think we need a voice vote on this one, please.
Mr. Coffey?
No.
Dr. Selkirk? Mr. Starr?
No.
Mr. Gutierrez?
Yes.
Mr. Birch? Ms. Drummond?
Yes.
Ms. Osiander?
Maybe, yeah.
Not a choice.
That's the answer of the night.
No, but it's primarily because I couldn't articulate a rationale. Sorry, Sheila.
That's fine.
Ms. Johnston?
No, I'm somewhat conflicted like Ms. Osiander.
Mr. Flynn?
Yes.
Ms. Gray Jackson?
Yes.
Mr. Clayman?
Yes.
Okay, that motion passes 6-5. A final amendment that I have is number 6, Dr. Selkirk.
Yes, page 10, economic development, economic and community development capital improvement priorities, the amendment to include the Department of Health and Human Service Building. The Department of Health and Human Service Building, 825 L Street, is an aging facility and no longer is capable of supporting the provisions of the needed services. Studies of the future facility have repeatedly found that it is it needs either extensive remodeling or replacement. The Community Health and Human Service Commission has set this as one of its top priorities for the last few years. A feasibility study and conceptual planning study could be completed for $200 million.
Second?
$2 million. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you for that correction, Dr. Selkirk. Ms. Johnston. Oh, okay. Are there any questions or comments on this amendment? Is there an objection to this amendment? Oh, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah. Our only concern would be that over the last decade, there have been several very, very comprehensive studies, and I think some of those could probably be dusted off and amended and modified without $2 million. I mean, really an exhaustive look at the need, what sort of facility, where it might go. Both Heritage Land Bank and the Community Development Authority have kept that in their radar as far as potential parcels. My concern more is the amount than anything else. It's I think maybe if we don't put a dollar amount on it, then I don't know. It's just I just think it's an awful lot of money to ask for kind of reinventing the wheel a little bit.
I think the intent of this committee was to keep it alive, and I was there for their discussion, Mr. Chair, regarding the amount. And if the administration wants to propose a more appropriate amount that's more directly useful to the information that you have before us, I would accept that as a friendly amendment to this amendment. I would just change it. I think the intention is to keep this project alive. There has been a lot of work So the question is what kind of resources are necessary to take it to the next step? So have you got a recommendation?
But I don't, because again, this is one that I just literally just saw today, and so didn't have time to really evaluate the previous studies. I was told by several people that, there's been a lot of work done and fairly recently, so hard to put a dollar figure on it. I would say, I guess if I had to guess an amount that, probably not to exceed $500,000 could probably get us right where we need to go.
I would accept that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to revise this to be not to exceed $500,000.
Okay, so a motion to change the funding request to $500,000. Acceptable second, okay. Is there any objection to the amendment? Seeing and hearing none, that's approved. We have the amendment as amended before us. Ms. Johnson, are you backing on this one?
Yes, I'm sorry. I had an additional amendment to my amendment on the Seward Highway turn lane.
Oh, we're not done with this amendment yet.
Okay.
We have the amended amendment back before. Sorry, we'll get to that.
I thought we...
No problem. Is there any objection to the amendment as amended? Seeing and hearing none, that amendment is approved. And if you'll hold off for 1 second, Ms. Johnston, I would like to quickly recognize some folks. We have Cub Scouts in the audience, and we'd love for them to come up and introduce themselves and tell us what they're working on, or Boy Scouts. Come on up, gentlemen. You're on the hot seat now.
I agree.
If you'd like to introduce them first, it's okay.
Well, I don't want to do the talking for these fine young men, but this is Troop 186. We're in the Sand Lake area. We wanted to come here tonight and take a look at our local government in action and show these guys how decisions are made on a local basis.
Well, thank you for coming.
Go ahead.
Go ahead and pull that mic down so we can hear you.
Okay, my name is Tyler, and my last name is Blanch, Blanch.
What badge are you working on today, Mr. Blanch?
What?
What badge are you working on today? What project are you working on today?
The civilian pin. No, the citizenship pin.
Very good. Thank you.
My name's Trevor Smith, and I'm working on citizenship too.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
I'm Luke Sherman. We're all working on our citizenship.
Very good. Sir, do you want to say a few words as well? You can raise it back up.
Yeah. Dave Sherman, and I'm working on citizenship too.
Excellent. Well, Mr. Sherman.
Work in progress.
All right. Well, thank you all, gentlemen. We appreciate your coming down. With that, Ms. Johnston.
I apologize. I had a second amendment that I needed to do as far as the Seward Highway turn lane, and it's on page 20. Amend the listing of the highest priority transportation projects to include the additional priority to read as follows. Present language is unchanged and not set out. And it's item number 24, and it's a Seward Highway turning lane at mile 79 for access to Alaska Wildlife Conservation Center in Portage Creek. This turn lane is needed to prevent accidents due to the increase in traffic along the Seward Highway and from the Portage-Whittier turnoff. And as far as House districts, it's all districts, depends upon South Central and Peninsula-bound transportation corridor, and the amount is set is $1.252 million. Thank you.
Point of information. I'm sorry. I thought we approved that one. That was your last amendment.
We approved the amendment to page 6, but I didn't do the page 20.
Thank you.
I'm still working on the new year here.
Piecemeal can be fun.
Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just neglected to ask the question before, Ms. Johnston. We never determined the answer. We discussed this when the committee met last as to whether or not this actually is still within the municipality. It's pretty darn near our boundary, but is it still within?
It is part of my district.
Okay. Thank you. That's all.
How many voters do you have there?
Let's not get personal.
Ms. Osiander, you were back in the queue, or?
No.
No? Okay.
I can answer that question, twice as many as you.
Are there any objections to the amendment? All right. Seeing and hearing none, that one is approved. Madam Chair, you want to take a break now?
I think.
Oh, wait, yeah, okay. All right. We now have the legislative program as amended before us. Are there any comments or questions before it? Dr. Selcraig is in the queue first.
I'd like to, first of all, I'd like to commend the administration on this. I think it's a good, solid document, and I think with the revisions that we've added, it's continues to be a good, solid document. And particularly, I'd like to point out the top legislative priorities and the last item on page 5, and that addresses unfunded mandates at the state level. And I teach a public policy class, and students get to do research papers on whatever they want. And I had a student do a research paper exploring the possibility of a tax reduction for people who are deployed. And so she looked into the history of tax reductions and tax deferrals, and she stumbled across information about the cost associated with a senior citizen tax reduction that we have that was basically a mandated item from the state. And she did some numbers on it, and interestingly enough, and I briefly checked these today just kind of informally with the administration because I didn't want to talk about them until I had some sort of kind of verification that they were close. This year, the senior citizen tax benefit reduction cost the city $21 million. Over the last 14 years, it's cost us close to $160 million. When you begin to add the mandates that basically, and I'm completely supportive, I think it's great that senior citizens have a tax break, and that was brought to them by the state. The same legislation that brought the tax break to those citizens also promised to pay back the municipality. And in a way, it's a great deal for state legislators to give things to people. But what they've really done is they've increased the tax burden on everyone else in the community. And when you begin to add up the unfunded mandates, it's dramatic. It's just dramatic. So one of the things I would like and be so grateful for the administration to do is, in light of the fact that this is one of our top priorities, I would love to see a 5 or 6 page, not too long, briefing paper that has some charts that show the cost of these unfunded mandates both in an annual level and the cumulative level to our community. Because when I looked at this, I realized, thanks, legislature, for $22 million in terms of revenue sharing, but, we wouldn't need the $22 million, or at least it would have been a lot better if they had turned around and actually paid what they promised to pay us over the years. So the whole issue of these unfunded mandates are dramatic when you look at the cost, and I think that the state has a responsibility to step up and pay for the things that they've promised to pay for, and I'm just so happy to see this as one of the prime things on the front, right up front in our document. And I think it's really important both for the Assembly to understand the costs associated with these mandates and the community as a whole, and then for our Anchorage caucus to pull together and to pull all their votes together to make sure these unfunded mandates get addressed, because it's very, very expensive for our community. I think we'll all be shocked when we see the numbers. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Selcraig. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you, and that's a good suggestion, Dr. Selcraig. To help quantify it a little bit really puts, I guess, a little more clarity to it, and it is a big number when you look at the cumulative. I think the report that I got here, which looks like was done by yourself or your student.
No, I want to give her credit. It's not on the front. It was at Jeanette Reddington. And actually, when she finished the report, she said to me, I hope you share this with the Assembly. And unfortunately, this doesn't have the cover on it, but it was Jeanette Reddington, and she moved me.
Oh, very good. Yeah, $159 million over the last 10 years or 14 years.
Yeah, it's dramatic. Let's go get that money.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion.
All right. Mr. Coffey, you were in the queue earlier. You want back in? Okay. The motion before us is the legislative plan as amended. Are there any objections to adoption? Seeing and hearing none, we're done with that one. Moving right along, and I neglected to mention this earlier, item 13B, which is not up right now, but we're going to postpone it another month. So if you're here to talk about the fee waivers, you can leave now. Moving on to item 13A, Resolution 2009-287, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, approving the Girdwood Water Improvements Phase 2B transmission main and providing for an assessment of benefited properties at time of service connection, AWWU. The public hearing on this item is now open. Is there anybody who wishes to testify on this matter? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed. Move to approve. Thank you, Mr. Coffey. Ms. Osiander, you seconding? Okay. Are there any comments from the Assembly on this matter? Is there any objection to this matter? Seeing and hearing none, this matter is approved. Yes, Mr. Gutierrez, if I could get an item to continue the public hearing to February 16, please.
We have to open the public hearing.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. That is correct. I will open the public hearing on item 13B. It's an ordinance amending provisions of the Anchorage Code, chapters 1235, related to deteriorated property, and to provide for waiver of certain municipal fees as an economic development incentive. The public hearing on this is open. However, if you testify tonight, you will not be permitted to testify when we finally get to this, hopefully on February 16. With that, does anybody wish to speak to us on this matter? Seeing and hearing no one.
Mr. Chairman, I move to continue the public hearing on this item until the meeting of February 16th.
Second.
Is there an objection to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, we'll see you next month. Item 13C, an ordinance repealing Anchorage Municipal Code Section 12.15.012 and repealing and reenacting Section 12.15.015 to codify state law exemptions.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Mr. Gutierrez, or Ms. Gray-Jackson, I believe you have an S version on this one? Oh, we have a public hearing first. Okay. So for those of you who wish to testify on this, please make sure you have version S1. The public hearing on this item is now open. Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed. Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Move to introduce and approve AO 2009-133 S1.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any objection? Mr. Joe, do you want to speak to your new version, or?
Yes, I'd like to. I'd like to speak to the ordinance, period. I have some comments to make in terms of the senior citizen property tax exemption and the veterans, but after hearing Dr. Selcraig remind us of how much it costs, I'm still going to say what I have to say. Anyway, what moved me to even to investigate bringing forward this ordinance was the fact that there was a senior who approached me who turned 65 in time enough but just had no idea that that program even existed. And I really think that, I mean, it is an unfunded mandate, and it's a burden on the rest of us, but when you talk about providing property tax relief, this is the avenue to provide property tax relief. And it's a lot of money. It's $150,000 off of your assessed value for seniors who turn 65 years old. And I had a wonderful meeting in July with folks in property appraisal, and we talked about that issue, and I talked about ways we can let our seniors know when they're, eligible for this exemption. We need to let them know. It's a burden on the rest of us, but it's a mandated exemption, and hopefully one day the state will recognize and realize that they need to step up to the table and reimburse us for this. But at the same time, we shouldn't make our seniors who qualify not aware of it. And so from that conversation led a conversation about other things, and in particular, one of the things that I thought that we needed to do was to make all of the application deadlines the same, because they're different. And this ordinance makes all the application deadline exemptions March 15th. It also creates an administrative review for exemption determination prior to a taxpayer going to Superior Court. It also provides a language for state mandatory exemptions to include religious, charitable, cemetery, hospital, and education categories, because it's a state exemption, and we provide it, but it's not in our municipal code. And it creates an annual filing requirement for mandatory exemptions. The one thing I want to say, though, is that there's been a lot of work done on this. We've been talking about this and working on this since July. And at this point, I just want to thank our attorney, Julia, Rhonda, Marty McGee and Kelly and everybody who was involved in making this a really, really good ordinance. But there's one change that was made a few days ago, and that is adding historic properties to this ordinance, and I'm not quite there yet. I just simply have not had enough time to review this exemption. So with that said, I would like to make an amendment, Mr. Chairman, if it's appropriate right now.
You have the floor, Ms. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to move on page 12 of the S1 version that we delete beginning at line 32 through line 17. I believe that should cover it. And I'm not deleting this to never address it again. I'm deleting it because I'm just not ready. I haven't had enough time, but I do trust that it will be brought back to amend this section of the code in the future. But I'd like to move on with the rest of the ordinance because there's a lot of work that went into it, and it's ready to be approved.
Yeah, if you hit the motion button, please.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. That amendment is before us. I have people in the queue. Okay. Mr. Coffey?
Thank you, Ms. Gray Jackson, because I looked at the summary of economic effects, and they showed no economic effects, and I thought if you were adding a property that there would be some. So I'm glad that you've moved it, and I support the removal of it, and we can bring it back when we know what it'll cost us. Thank you, ma'am, for that.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey.
That was just to restate the motion for everybody. Beginning on page 12, line 32 through page 13, line 17, delete all material. Okay. Are there any further comments on the amendment? Seeing and hearing none, is there any objection to that amendment? Okay, that amendment is approved. We have the original S1 version as amended back before us. Dr. Selkrig?
I'd like to make the point that actually I'm going to support this, and I think this is a separate issue from the the unfunded mandates. So, I think the issue is making the state pay for what they've promised to pay for, and I think lining up the application deadlines is a good idea, and so I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Dr. Selkrig. Ms. Osiander?
I wanted to ask Mr. McGee a couple of questions. This issue of moving all the dates together in one place is a good one. It came from a number of sources. It was mentioned, I know, by members of the Board of Adjustment as well as in that audit that was done by the state assessor. So I'm supportive. I've tried to follow this through its various versions. And I wish I'd gotten this a little bit earlier because I'm not sure that I've got everything matched back and forth with earlier versions. So, Mr. McGee. That's fine. So, Mr. McGee, could you highlight, please, all the things that are different from current practice in the S versions to make sure that we're all on top of them? One, obviously, is the dates.
Yeah, I'll try to respond to that through the chair.
Thank you, Mr. McGee.
The issue of what's different from current practice, a lot of what we've done here in the code is to review the code and make it consistent with current practice. So it's not different than current practice, but it's making the code consistent with current practice in some respects. There were 5 major points, 4 of them excluding the historic property issue. The consistency of the filing deadline is one, and in code there were different deadlines for the senior and the residential exemption programs, and no deadline established for the mandatory exemption programs. So that was an important point. The state exemptions, even though they were in state law, they weren't mentioned in municipal code at all. And so we were administering them consistent with state law and court decisions. And so what we've done now is codify that. So it isn't necessarily a change in practice, but it is a change to code. The requirement for the application review is new, and we have not had a formal application review process or requirement for the exempt parties to file with us annually, but we think that's mandatory in order to be consistent with the code changes in 2003, which said we would annually review all exempt property and determine whether it was correctly exempt. And so this is an administrative tool that will allow us to do that and be consistent with code.
Can I interject on that one real quick before you move on? So are you anticipating adding responsibility for the inspectors to do more than they're doing now?
No, there will be no additional responsibility for my appraisers over what they're currently doing.
Sorry, appraisers.
But what it does do is it requires the exempt party to let us know and file something which we hope is simple and takes little time on their part, so we can validate formally. Right now, the basic challenge is we ask them questions and they almost never respond to the questions. So even though they're getting the exemption, we haven't been taking exemptions away because of that. But this gives us...
potentially you could now.
Yes. So it gives us some administrative tools to say, respond to the questions you're asked.
Okay. Is there a way to appeal if you'd say no?
Yes. Any time we would change a determination of taxability, now there's an administrative review process, so you can appeal, and that's part of what's built into the code here.
Okay.
Before, there was no formal process for that, and the only way to appeal a decision that I made was for them to go to the state court, which is expensive for everyone.
Okay.
And then the last part was the historic building. Now, the community purpose exemption basically has been removed in the code as we have it.
Well, actually, that was the next question I was going to ask. I see it on page 10, though.
Excuse me, I have to correct my statement. We changed the way the limitation or the determination of community purpose exemption was.
Could you clarify that? I'm not sure I heard you.
Yeah. I'm going to ask Kelly Taylor to respond to that. She's written it, so that...
I'm new to this, so through the chair, Ms. Osiander, the revisions, making this broad of an ordinance change, it's like making sausage. We went through a lot of components, and there were a lot of changes with collaboration between Ms. Tucker and Rhonda. What was good about it is through discussions with Ms. Gray-Jackson and through our collaboration, we identified that the community purpose exemption, which is not a very common exemption here in Anchorage, had historically in the prior ordinance had been limited with a dollar limit, and it was capped off at the top. Any one organization was limited to a total aggregate of $100,000 exemption, or any one parcel at a $25,000 assessed value limit. Now, as you can imagine, historically that was appropriate perhaps 20 years ago in terms of land value and of building value. As we've moved forward in time and assessments and value of property has gone up, that limit has been exceeded. So the purpose in the S version that's come through is providing an opportunity to have an adjustment, an annualized adjustment based on the average of the assessed value of similarly situated zoned property. So, for example, there would be, I'm going to use Habitat for Humanity as an example. They could have 4 total exemptions on individual pieces of property. No one of those pieces of property could exceed the annual average of the assessed property of a similarly situated property. So you couldn't have a multi-million-dollar piece of land that Habitat for Humanity owns because it would be a huge piece of property outside of the average of a similarly zoned piece of property. I hope I've clarified.
My last or lingering concern is on page 11, where it says no single organization shall receive more than 4 exempt parcels. I'm thinking particularly about the Chudiak Volunteer Fire Department, where there are multiple stations. And we're still Mr. Mayor, I want to remind you have to have a meeting to clarify ownership of some of those properties. But why did you come up with 4?
Through the chair, Ms. Osiander, it was a simple math approach of looking at the cap of the total for any one organization at $100,000. And then the prior ordinance had said the limit was $25,000. So our approach was to say 100,000 divided by 25,000 would equate to 4 parcels. That was the basic approach behind it.
If I could add, the community purpose exemption is rarely used in discussions amongst assessors across the state right now. Is that the trend is to use it even less. Most of the time, the charitable purpose exemption fits and is the useful tool when you're trying to exempt something like the fire stations you're talking about. And obviously, property that's owned by the government, if that's the case, is exempt constitutionally. So that's another tool we can use to deal with this issue.
That's the conversation we still have to have, though, is to determine if it's government or private. Right. So basically, you're being more flexible and more lenient than you were in the past with this. So even if I do have concerns about it being 4 and maybe it should be 5, in actuality, you're being more flexible to the organization than you were.
That's the intent.
Okay.
The final provision is the historic property component of this.
Yeah, which we just got rid of, so I'm not even going to go there, Mr.
All right.
McGee.
I won't
All right.
belabor it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. McGee, I just have a couple questions about terminology and the way they're sort of interchanged throughout the writings. And the exhibits aren't numbered by page, but for example, on Exhibit A, which is probably the 3rd page from the back, Exhibit A in Section B talks about you must file the letter of application no later than March 15th of the assessment year. And then Exhibit B talks about, under the community purpose one, in Section 4, it says the application shall be to the assessor no later than March 15th of the tax year. So what I'm concerned about is consistency in the verbiage. The taxes are assessed as of the end of the year. Taxes are levied at a different period of time, and we have a tax year and an assessment year. So if taxes are collected this year for last year's assessment, is the verbiage correct? I mean, I'm already confused reading this. I would want to know somebody in an application process. If we're just saying March 15th to cover last year's period ending December 31st, why don't we say something a little clearer to that effect? I mean, I'm flummoxed a little bit by how you've termed it, assessment and tax. Okay. But the verbiage is still the same here, Julia, in the way you're talking. Okay. I'll ask a more generic question then. What's the difference between an assessment year and a tax year?
And through the chair, probably nothing. State law determines our tax and assessment process to begin January 1st of each year. The time when we levy the tax and the time we assess the value are points in time which are determined partially by state law but primarily by local decisions.
So if we say in here somewhere, and Julie pointed out that it's not that reference, but in other parts where it says March 15th of the assessment year, is that technically correct then?
I believe that would be consistent with the intent. I don't think we'd have any objection to a correction of the language. We've, as Julie probably told you, we've worked a lot trying to get them consistent, and obviously at this point we aren't. So,
well, just the interchange between tax year, which to me it's tax levy year versus the assessment year. Assessment value is more, trying to determine by the year end occupancy by assessed year. It just, if it can be corrected as that. My next question would be implementation. We're now coming into, January's already occurring, and we're basically going to retroactive this to 2010. Is your department kind of ready for the appeal process? I see nods and all of that, but I don't want to mislead the public that they have new obligations now, which is a an application that has qualifying requirements on it and that. So my first question to you on the timing is, can you do it in the department? Are we going to do it well? And then does it leave anybody else out that, that we need to make sure they're alerted to the opportunity?
Through the chair, your concerns are certainly well taken. We believe we can implement this for this tax year and do it well. It will require some public education and public notice, but we've been preparing for this. We believe we have the systems in place to handle it, and we can do the job. So we believe it's correct to do this retroactive to the first of the year and affect the 2010 tax year.
The ability to have an appeal for declination gets awfully close to, say, first quarter budget reviews. You've got a 30-day time frame after such and such was received. We're going into 30 days, and it's going to be April 15th or pretty close. Pragmatically, then you would probably hear the case or schedule the case, and yet, the tax bills would have had to gone out and all of that. Does it start to clutter the picture and collectability as well as tax calculations? Do you find a concern there?
Through the chair, none at all. We're talking about approximately between 6,000 and 8,000 parcels entirely, which would be involved in this recertification process. We have the administrative mechanism in place to deal with a volume of concerns or objections. Historically, we've hardly had one a year where the determination of tax was an issue. So we think we easily have the administrative capacity to deal with this. I have to certify the value for tax by June 1st, and that's by state law. So we have a little more time than you might think in terms of dealing with these and getting it done. And even then, we have a $31 billion tax base, so the amount of value, and when we work with OMB and setting the mill rates, we make an assumption of a certain amount of adjustment. So changes inside that we don't think would make any material effect on our tax.
Thank you for the answers. That's all the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Starr. Are there any further questions or comments on this matter? Is there any objection to the ordinance as amended? Seeing and hearing none, that one is approved. We're going to take a 20-minute break. What? No, she's just cheering. Back to order. The item we have before it is item 13D, Ordinance 2009-134, an omnibus ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code and Anchorage Municipal Code of Regulations sections to authorize electronic, online, World Wide Web publication in lieu of newspaper publication.
Waive reading.
Thank you. This would be basically to change our current practice of publishing public notices in newspapers to using the online notification. Public hearing on this matter is now open. Anybody wishing to speak on this matter may come forward.
Thank you. My name is John McKay, Chairman Flynn. I'm here on behalf of the Anchorage Daily News and also to renew my citizenship badge, I guess. I wanted to, I apologize that it came late to a number of you, but I did put together a few points that I thought were relevant to this discussion and sent them to everybody's email. And if you didn't have a hard copy, I also brought that. But the gist of it is, first of all, I want to say a couple things. We appreciate the fact that we're all very aware that we're not living in the same world this year as we were 50 years ago when some of these laws were written, or 5 years ago for that matter. And we're not arguing that you should be tied to spending money on things that don't work, or that you have to deliver notice by putting it on the ink on the paper and driving it in a truck to somebody's doorstep. But we understand that there are some very significant advantages to that, some important things that are lost if we don't do that I think, frankly, shouldn't be overlooked. But we recognize that the momentum is definitely, everybody wants to say we need to take advantage of the opportunities of online advertising. And I think one of the things that's a little bit misleading about the statements about the subscription or the circulation is that, yes, those particular print are going down, but the newspapers, that's not how they communicate with everybody anymore. You have to take into account both. And so the Daily News, as well as the other media, live online as well as in municipality. So what we're really saying here is what you aren't taking into account is that when you say we reach 90% of the people because they have access, online access, 90% of the people, you could say 99% of the people have access if you posted something on the bulletin board because they could take the bus or the car down to the Hill Building and read it. The question is, where do people really go to get their information? And when in the whereas clauses it says there were 80,000 hits in September 2009 on the Muni website. While the same period there were 1.5 million hits on the Daily News website, just to give a comparison, an apples-to-apples comparison. So where is it that people go for their information? And what we're saying is it's a mistake at this point not to take advantage of online advertising, but it's a mistake to say that this is going to be legally sufficient to put notices on the Muni website and assume that everybody's going to find that, and that should be legally sufficient. We need to do something more, and I think it's a great opportunity to take advantage of a transition to say, how can we give the most effective, meaningful public notice at a time when we're going to make this transition and maybe say we're not mired to simply doing newspaper advertising, but how can we focus on something other than simply saving costs, and how do we give effective notice?
Thank you very much, Mr. McKay. Are there any questions for Mr. McKay? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Derek Counter, D-E-R-I-C, Counter, C-O-U-N-T-E-R. I'm a tax-paying voter, a father of two. I'm also a project manager. I'm an IT professional for the last 15 years, and I love Alaska. I appreciate the opportunity to talk in front of you. I do want to point out that I usually don't come out to these events and speak publicly, even though I can speak publicly. I'm also representing several of my IT professionals that cannot make it here this evening on behalf of IT professionals. A couple things that struck me as very beneficial to this change. One of them, to me, is it's fiscally sound. I do understand the media outlets do have some concerns of loss of revenue. I think Mr. Wheeler, who's here somewhere this evening, presented a cost savings estimate of $20,000 for this year, and I believe it's $40,000 going forward for future years. I think that's actually a little conservative. I think the cost savings are going to be significantly higher. Being in IT, anytime you have cost savings that are derived from little to no effort put forth, and the fact that somebody in the municipality brought forth this cost savings theme for taxpayers to benefit from, there's programs that I would like to see that money shuffled to. And here's where the part where the father in me comes out, where I have two little kids that would love to have more parts, that would love to have more arts. I do realize that online media is rapidly increasing, and I do think that is the avenue we should go, but at less cost to the taxpayers. We got Barrow, of all places, is doing RFPs online. We've got the state of Alaska doing online postings for both jobs and RFPs. I see no reason why the municipality can't do the same. I myself have participated in several RFPs and several RFIs that were all strictly PDF-based online. I logged in, gave my name, and downloaded the documents. Very cost-efficient and didn't cost the muni or the state a nickel. Bottom line, the taxpayers are going to love you if you do this. Of course, every one of the taxpayers is going to give you a list of things they would like it to be spent on instead. I thank you for the time this evening.
Thank you. So there's a couple of questions for you.
Oh, I'm sorry?
Dr. Selkirk?
I agree with you in terms of the concept of online. I think it is the future. But one of the things I'm concerned about here is making sure that we approach this in a really sophisticated way in terms of making sure that we're using the online services that are out there that people are really connected with. And what do you, in terms of the last presenter's comment where he contrasted in the same amount of time, the Daily News, and I think there are other active sites. He gave us, there's the portal GCI Net that I guess that news site has a significant amount of hits. And when you begin to look at how our website ranks in all those other, in broader menu, have you got some thoughts about how to approach this? I mean, I'm excited about going online. What I want to do, though, is make sure that we're really reaching the citizens, and I'm a little concerned about just using our website as the primary place. What are your thoughts about that?
I totally agree with that assessment. One of the things that I'll use a quick analogy here. You would go to a car dealership to fix your car. You would not go to a radio store to fix your car. Or if I'm going to go research cars, I'm going to go to a cars website. If I'm going to go look for a job, I'm going to go to a job website, helpwanted.com, Craigslist, things that are cost efficient that we can utilize that municipality doesn't have to pay, and if it is pay, it's very small in dollar amounts. But
I want to make sure I understand what you said there, though. So you actually think we should be broad in terms of what we're using on the net? Is that what you're saying? Is that we should be
point? The relationship that the conversation was earlier from the media outlet that was presented was the hit count on Anchorage Daily News was X. The hit count on the municipality was Y. There's a big discrepancy. Well, of course there is. You go there for news. You go here for things municipality related. And if you can't, the apples to apples conversation comes back into effect. People go to Anchorage Daily News website for one thing. They go to municipality website for a completely different thing.
Okay, so you're saying that actually the places where you have maybe 1.5 million people, you don't particularly see a benefit to making that information directly available there?
I think the number doesn't truly represent what those people are going to that website for. They could be going there strictly to download Sudoku or to shop for a car, but it doesn't specifically say those 1 million hits are for people looking for jobs or people looking for RFPs.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Coffey.
Thank you. I'll try to make it simple. Do you think that this methodology, assuming we're going to have about a 6-month process of dual publication, website and newspaper, will give good and proper notice to people?
I think 6-month window should be more than sufficient. You can set the website up in very short time, and you can prove it out. Once you start seeing your numbers and your statistics, there is no reason why you still can't publish a simple email to a lot of the .org organizations out there that are looking for job postings and looking for RFPs. I myself have just left the PMI Alaska chapter of 400 members as the president, and one of the things that we offered was we went out and found job postings and put it on our website just for our members at no cost to those companies. Things like that are very beneficial. If you still do it in parallel for a short period of time, I think it's more than sufficient for the public community.
And cost-wise, it's doing that type of thing would not be particularly expensive. Putting on somebody's website for information on notices from the MOA, go to muni.org.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. And that, I think everybody here, our concern is, are we making sure that people hear about and can find the meetings of the municipality?
And to a certain point, that communication, that when it does go out for that 6-month window or a year window, whatever that time period is, I would take advantage. You have bulletin boards all over the city that you can utilize to post information in regards to, hey, this change is coming. Or maybe you continue to put something up down in the lobby of all the municipality facilities that says, hey, this RFP is coming up. These job postings are available. Those things literally take somebody printing it off and posting it in the lobby of the facilities where somebody can constantly go that doesn't have internet access or doesn't have an iPhone with 2 megabit download to look at websites.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Welcome, sir.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Jones. I'm Executive Director with Morse Communications here in Anchorage. Been involved in publishing for about 25 years, and I can tell you from my experience that the newspapers in this community are a very powerful medium in an attempt to distribute your public notices and make them available to a broad array of people across the municipality. I do find it interesting and a little bit premature for people to stand here and say that 6 months would be an adequate period to determine the effectiveness of online postings for your notices versus posting them in the newspapers. Because until you see the numbers,
I don't think that anybody can say how many people are actually going to view these notices that you publish on the municipality website. You've stated that it is important for the municipality to give the citizens reasonable notice of the municipal meetings and business, and I'm sure that you take this very seriously. You also use some data saying that you had in September of 2009 86,000 visits, which I'm assuming this might be a reference to unique visitors. During that same period, you had 616,000 page views approximately and 11,000 downloads. But my question to you is, once these notices are published, these specific notices that are now being published in newspapers online, how many people are going to actually view those specific pages versus the number of people who would be exposed or potentially exposed to these advertisements posted in the newspapers? It's interesting, this correlation that's drawn to decline in newspaper circulation versus increase in people having access to the internet. However, if the Anchorage Daily News, for example, publishes or prints 50,000 newspapers on a Monday or a Tuesday, the readership of that newspaper is going to be, on average, more than 2 people. So you have 100,000 potential people looking at or having the opportunity to be exposed to those public notices, for instance, publishing one day in the newspaper versus what kind of activity is going to be generated on your municipal website over the period of a day or a week or a month. So I guess my comments are that I'm not sure that 6 months running concurrently online and in print is going to give you an idea of whether or not your online advertising is going to be effective, especially if you're not particularly promoting the posting of those particular notices online through some form of advertisement.
Thank you, sir. There are several people who'd like to ask you questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Dr. Selcraig?
So you've worked in advertising for a long time and have a good handle on that, on the efforts around advertising. And so my question is the strategic thinking behind advertising, is it, if I understand what you just said, is that you actually put the advertisement where the people are in order to catch their eye? Is that, I mean, is there some, in other words, when you're, or could you explain, I guess it's not clear to me, if you wanted to maximize exposure to public information in this community, what would be some of the considerations that we should be thinking about?
Thank you for the question. I think it depends on who you're trying to reach.
The broader public.
With your posting. If you think about a newspaper, and for example, I'm using the Daily News because they have the broadest reach, and they publish or print 50,000 newspapers in a day, then you have the potential exposure of over 100,000 people in that day seeing that paper. If you post your notices online to your website, then people would have to actively bookmark that site and visit that site, presumably on a regular basis, in order to gain the information that's in the notice. Whereas it's almost an inadvertent or an unintentional exposure where people are looking through the newspaper and they see a notice that they normally wouldn't necessarily have exposure to, and suddenly they're made aware of activities or how monies are being spent or things of that nature.
So what you're saying is that when it's in the paper, there's a broader opportunity for people to notice it in contrast to somebody having to have a specific interest to go get it. Is that?
Well, for example, if you ran a notice in the Daily News for one day, and you had, in theory, 50,000 people who bought that newspaper and another multiplier effect of maybe 100%, so 100,000 people who would potentially be exposed. If you don't generate a similar number, let's say that on that day 300 people actually saw those notices or went and looked at those notices online, then I would say that your exposure in the newspaper is exponentially greater than what you received from your online posting.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Coffey?
I think you said two things. First of all, we'd have to count the hits specific to the notice section, if you would, of the city's website.
That's correct. You'd have to monitor and track those specific postings.
Right, and I just asked the administration if you could, and their answer was yes. And then you also mentioned an outreach program. And so to the degree that this is published and noticed and supported during, say, a 6-month period, which is when our contract expires July 1 with the publishing, with the newspaper that publishes our notices now, then you would have those two factors would enable you to measure the success of this effort to save money and give broad notice. Is that right? Is there anything else?
I guess I would ask the question, what is the criteria? In other words, what number do you attain? What's the inflection point of the number of visitors to those specific pages that you say that now our exposure is what we need it to be? So is that number 5,000 people a day, 5,000 people a month?
Right now.
Who is determining that number?
Right now we deliver, it's in the Journal of Commerce, and that's got 7,000 circulation, and it comes out once a week. So that means there'd probably be one opportunity in a month for a notice of an assembly hearing, perhaps one for one and one for the second meeting. And using your number of doubling, that's 14,000. So I suppose if you found you were getting 15,000 hits a week on that notice, you might say that's okay. I don't know that, and I don't know what the criteria might be, but my question to you was, if you count how you're receiving, people are checking notices, and if you conduct an outreach campaign to get them aware, then would those be the two things you would try to judge before you, to make a determination as to whether or not you're giving effective notice? Or is there some other element I'm missing?
No, I would think that you were accurate in that assessment. Are the notices that are currently being published in the Alaska Journal of Commerce, are those the only notices that pertain to this?
Well,
or are there other notices that are being posted that are included in this ordinance?
they're the legal notices of events. There's a whole list of things attached to this ordinance. You
So
can
they're
see
not-
all of the different notices that are required.
So they're not just the notices, the assembly meeting?
No, I use that as an example.
Okay, sorry.
So if you count them and you do an outreach program, you should after some period of time be able to judge whether or not you're giving effective notice.
Based on the specifics of the individual notices, again, if you went to the Daily News...
It won't change. The notices are the notices. They will be the same.
But if you're publishing other notices other than in Alaska Journal of Commerce and you're publishing them in the Daily News, for example?
Some.
Okay. Then I think you would need a different criteria in order to evaluate the effectiveness of your online versus the...
I don't know what the criteria will be. I'm asking you if there are any other things besides those two that you would want to include, and then you can establish a criteria depending on whatever factors, such as Daily News versus Journal of Commerce, you choose. What else would you want to know, regardless of what your criteria is? Is there anything else other than how many people are responding?
I guess I would want to know what is a comparable comparison between those two numbers, the number of people who visited the online postings versus the number of newspaper notices that were printed, in order to come to a determination of their effectiveness.
But those things are known. You know what circulation is, and you can compare that to the count. So, okay, thank you. That's all I have. Oh, by the way, I forgot one thing. Are you in the publishing newspaper business?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We have a few more. Mr. Clayman.
Which papers are you involved in publishing?
I publish the Alaska Journal. As far as notices are concerned, the two papers are the Alaska Journal of Commerce and Alaska Star. We publish several other publications, Alaska Magazine.
Is I noticed this resolution lists the Journal of Commerce circulation at about 7,000. Is that accurate from your understanding? You present some very interesting points about kind of how do you determine your effectiveness of publication. What keeps striking me about the publication notice, this really resonates when I've talked with folks, businesses that are involved in bidding on government contracts, that the businesses that are engaged in that, it doesn't matter whether we publish it in the Daily News, the Journal of Commerce, or online. My sense is that the businesses that are actively engaged in that are going to figure out how to get the regular notices, and they're going to get the regular notices however it's published because they've got a vested interest in knowing what's going on. And then there's another kind of subset of people which I would describe as kind of nebulous, which is who really reads these notices? I mean, who opened when it was published in the Daily News? How many people of the I'm just glancing quickly, the 50-plus thousand subscribers to the Daily News, how many of those folks open the paper and see, oh, look, there's the Assembly agenda. I'm not going to read the sports section. I'm not going to read the comics. I'm going to settle down and read every item on the Assembly agenda. And my general sense is that of the 50,000-plus readers, a substantial minority of them read the Assembly agenda when it was published in the Daily News. And we kind of went away from that because it was more expensive to publish there than in the Journal of Commerce. And now we're looking at yet another cost-saving measure. And I keep coming up with the same question, is who is really actively looking to read this? And the people who are actively looking to read it, are they able to get it as easily online as they're getting it on the Journal of Commerce? And at least from my perspective, looking solely at the Journal of Commerce, I would tend to think that the average member of the public probably goes online to read our agenda if they're trying to find something far more often than they go search on a copy of the Journal of Commerce, because the circulation is frankly very, very low. So in terms of that, my sense about how much are people really getting published seems very nebulous, and I'm wondering if you can give me any insight about not so much circulation, but of people that are getting the circulation, how many really are actually looking at those notices, if you have any idea?
If we follow that line of reasoning, then I would say that if you solely and exclusively published your notices online, then you are only going to attract, or the only people who are going to see those notices are the people who are actively involved. So you've eliminated that opportunity to expose the rest of the general public to what is going on. So I would say that if you use that line of reasoning, then you are defeating the first sentence in the memorandum that says that it's an important obligation of the municipality to give its citizens reasonable notice of upcoming municipal meetings and business, and provide easy access to information about municipal activities. If that is the case, then you are going to eliminate all of those folks who maybe are not actively involved today, who but may get actively involved tomorrow because of their exposure to a notice.
Well, I certainly appreciate the perspective. I'm not sure if we ask the public that's, say, looking at Assembly agendas, whether more people look at it online or the Journal of Commerce. If I were betting, I'd bet that more people read our agenda online than read it on the Journal of Commerce.
But is your objective to reach the people who, again, are actively involved today, or is it to make a broad-based appeal to the general populace and citizenry of the municipality in order that they would be aware of what's going on?
Well, I guess a little bit of debate. I think if the point is to reach the public, the Journal of Commerce isn't doing it.
But you don't have any numbers from an online endeavor to
Point
compare.
of order, Mr. Chairman. This is debate, not inquiry. Thank you.
Okay. Another couple more questions, sir.
Sure.
Mr. Starr?
Well, it is a little rhetorical. You don't know how many people are buying your newspaper specifically to get the agendas, do you?
No.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Gutierrez?
Thank you. After the journal is published, how often? Once a week?
Yes.
Daily News is published every day. A notice is published in either paper. We'll use the journal as an example, because right now you have the contract. How long is it available to the public? If a week later, I'm curious, I want to see something's going on with the municipality, it's 2 o'clock in the morning because I can't sleep, so I'm curious, can I have a copy of the Journal of Commerce available to me so I can find this old notice, find the documents. Are the documents that are attached to that notice also available in the print media?
I'm not sure I understand your question. The paper, the shelf life is essentially a week, if that's what you're asking.
It's published. It's available to whomever might be able to read it for a period of a week.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's
Mm-hmm.
There appear to be no more questions, sir. Thank you for your forbearance. All right. Welcome, sir.
Good evening. My name is Tim Pearson, and as many of you guys know, I'm a municipal employee, but tonight I'm exercising the privilege and pleasure to speak as a private citizen. I think we're maybe making this issue way more complicated than it really is. This information that's published, municipal notices, it's not a tall, slinky model in the latest fashion. It's not a fancy new ed sports car. It's not something that attracts our attention. It's something we have to go looking for. And I think most people in 2010 have become acclimated to when I want to seek information, the first thing I do is determine where that information is stored. What's the repository? And I go to the repository and consume that information, whether that's who died this week, what's the assembly agenda, what properties are being foreclosed upon. I, as a consumer of that specific type of information, learn where that information is stored and go to that place and look at that information. Personally, I spend a lot of time on the Internet. It's a big part of my job. It's a big part of my personal life. And I've become used to the first thing I do is Google. Everybody Googles. I can really easily Google Anchorage municipal notices and find if that's in the newspaper, if that's in a bucket on the floor in the corner, or if that's online. So I personally, and I'm sure there are many people in the world like me, prefer information online due to how easily it can be updated, ease of access, anywhere, anytime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. No questions, but some of us do Yahoo rather than Google. All right. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to us on this matter? Come on down, sir.
My name is Clayton Walker. I work with Alaska Law Offices here in Anchorage, have for over half a dozen years. We deal with computer data significantly. We've got around 25,000 cases in our files. All computers crash. We buy new computers every other month. They continue to crash. Today, again, crashes. We have to have evidence in order to comply with laws.
Thank you, sir.
Electronics is not evidence.
Is there anybody else who wishes to speak to us on this matter? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Are there any?
Point of order, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify on the paperwork. I was looking at the last 4 or 5 pages, and I went over and spoke to Mr. Wheeler. If you look at the numbered pages 1 through 10, those should have been part and parcel of it. The things that come on the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages should not be, but the very last page that has the certifications from the administration and so on should be. So I just wanted everybody to be clear on the paperwork, because there was papers here that don't belong here. How's that?
A metaphor there somewhere.
Yes.
Dr. Selcraig, you're next in the queue.
I think there's an important discussion that needs to go on about what public notice is. I've actually spent my life engaged in public involvement and engaging citizens to come out and talk about things that matter to them. And part of what has to happen is people have to know something is out there that they have an interest in order to show up. So lots of people show up here because they heard about it from somebody or they saw the notice somewhere. There's a whole variety of reasons that people kind of find the information and come here. But it's our obligation, I think, to be really thoughtful at this point and recognize that there are many things that we talk about that matter to people only once or twice in their lives. And they're not people who are going to daily check what our agenda is, so that we really need to think about ways to place our information so that it truly is convenient, so that people can glance at it and see it and respond to the things that matter to them. And I'm comfortable with the concept of online. I think it's okay. And I actually think that the Journal of Commerce is really very limited. I think that we should be looking at circulation when we're making this decision. It is circulation. And people do, I've run into people who said, I just saw that in the paper. I've never come down before, but it's about exposure. We really have an obligation to make our agendas and our actions accessible in a way that people don't have to step through or have to check regularly. It should move in front of them. And my concern about what's before us tonight is that there's not really a plan here. And I'm convinced that the Anchorage, that our Muni website is not enough. I mean, it takes a special person to continually check the website. A general citizen is busy and doesn't check the website, but they do want to know about things that matter to them. So I think we have an obligation to do some real research. I think that if it may cost a little more money to put access to our information on places that have common hits, and I think that the Daily News website seems to me to be a pretty important one, as does the Porthole GCI net website. And I don't know what the cost is to do that, but if we're going to go to online media or website information, we really need to place this so that people can be doing something else and notice our notice, because that's the spirit of public education. It's the spirit of public notice, is to just put it somewhere convenient. It used to be the grocery store, or it used to be town square. People walked by and noticed it and saw it. And so now media and websites are town squares, and we need to be in those town squares.
Thank you, Dr. Selkrig. Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is, in my estimation, way, way, way past time that we move in this direction. The current notification laws were written when FM radio was something that was new and cutting edge. We probably have assembly members who remember when there was an FM radio. Mr. Coffey, I knew you'd raise your hand.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a great line, yeah.
This is, we're talking about access and where we're going to see, where access is going to be gained by the most number of people. And right now, in this day and age, it is online. It is the internet. That's where people are going to be able to access their information. And maybe we need to find more ways to direct people to our websites, but I think the administration I trust, will certainly be doing some kind of advertising blitz to let people know, hey, we have this new online notification system. The reasons I think that this is important are many. Number one, we're going to reach thousands and thousands and thousands more people than we're reaching today, and we're going to do it at a fraction of the cost. And I don't think that that's a business model you can ever afford to pass up. We're going to reach so many more people than we are right now. The logic was more than one person is going to read a newspaper during the course of a day. Well, fine. If we want to follow that logic, if that's the most important thing, then we'd be advertising on television and radio and not in newspapers. Those are extraordinarily expensive modes of advertising, would cost us even more than kind of the outmoded print advertising that we're doing now. Online notifications will live, I don't want to say forever, barring, the earthquake that swallows Anchorage into the inlet, heaven forbid. The information on the municipal servers is backed up and will be there and be accessible. So if I want to see 10 years from now, was a certain meeting properly advertised? Was it noticed? I can go back and look very easily at the actual document. It'll still be there. Those files will still be there. If, the example I raised fairly inarticulately, unfortunately, if it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I can't sleep and I'm trying to figure out what's going on with municipal government, I can go to the website. It's there. It's available to me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. All I need is to have my laptop or my desktop or my iPhone or some other wireless device. We're kind of at the point in history with this that, we're talking to people who own horses at the advent of the horseless carriage and the Model T Ford. It was an uncomfortable transition in technology for a lot of people, and this is going to be an uncomfortable transition in technology for a lot of people. We struggle. I've been advocating here that we shouldn't be printing out, particularly our consent agenda, because it all goes in here, and this is what we throw away at the end of every meeting. If we use more and more online, we avoid this, we reach more people, we save an obscene amount of money. And although, maybe what we do need to do, we'll take Mr. Pearson's suggestion and have the online notifications advertised with a slinky model on a red sports car. Maybe that's the way to go. I don't know. But I think we're going to reach a lot more people. We're going to do it much more cheaply, and that's a business model that we can't pass up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gutierrez. Mr. Klayman.
After fair consideration, I'm going to support this ordinance change because, there's this trend that we've been seeing on boards and commissions. I remember when I was on the Bar Association board, we published everything in the Daily News, and people started complaining about the cost, and then somebody said, well, we can publish in the Journal of Commerce for a lot less. And the question was, well, does that meet the publication notice? And it's, well, yeah, because it's general circulation, and anybody can get it that wants it, even though not very many people actually subscribe compared to the Daily News. But there was a cost decision made to publish with the newspaper of lesser circulation, and this city has done that with the Journal of Commerce as well. Publication will just do it in the Journal of Commerce because that counts as general circulation, even though probably not that many people look at it except those that actually have the active interest to look. And I'm fairly convinced that the online option, especially if the city takes some efforts to have subscriber lists for people that want notices to receive those notices, and the city does some other things to improve notice. I think Dr. Selcraig's comments, though, about are we really doing a good job of getting public notice out there is a legitimate question, because I think oftentimes we'd say, well, what's the cheapest way? Is it general circulation? Notice is done, and don't worry about who really hears it. And so what I'm going to make I'm going to make a motion in just a second, which is to basically put this back up for review by this body a year from now, so we can actually get some information on how we've done with it, and if this has actually been getting a lot of notice, because I think we ought to be satisfied not looking ahead, but get some report back. So I would move an amendment to add a section 3 that would read, this ordinance shall come back for review by the Assembly in January 2011. Oh, I need to put motion, sorry.
Mr. Klayman, may I get a clarification? Are you moving a sunset amendment or just calling for review?
Calling for review.
Okay, thank you.
It's not for sunset, because if it's sunsetted, you have all these codes that would sunset, and then we'd have a host of problems.
Okay. All right. Mr. Gutierrez, you wish to speak to this amendment?
To the amendment, yeah. I would support the amendment. I think that's, one, it's good public process. It's a fair thing to do, but also because I'm very confident that after that year's time, we're going to see significant results. So I think that's a good thing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Coffey, also the amendment?
Yes. What are you going to review? Are you going to want to be specific about what it is you want to review? Number of hits? What?
I don't want to put it as part of the ordinance, but the intent is to get a report on what have we done, what are we doing to get public notice, and obviously some of the hits, but also some of the things they may have done to change the website to increase access. I think there should be a subscriber list. I mean, say if I'm an engineering business, I ought to be able to subscribe that I get the notice every time an ITB goes out that might interest me, so I don't always have to be going to the website and searching. But I'd like to see a list of what they have been doing for notice, and I don't think it would be appropriate to try to articulate all that in the amendment.
Well, I was thinking along somewhat similar lines, but since this won't be effective, it won't be the sole source of our publication until July 1, when our contract with the Journal expires, and that's when we could go to strictly website. Why don't we try to gather that information now in the next 7 months rather than in the next 12 months? So rather than amend the ordinance, just ask for a report maybe in June, when 6 months have gone by and we can see. Just a suggestion.
I would actually have no problem to have. I'd actually like to see both. I'd like to see what it looks like with print media going and what happens when print media goes away.
Any further comments on that amendment? Seeing and hearing none, is there objection to the amendment?
Mr. Coffey, do you want to add language to the amendment so it would say June 2010 and January 2011?
Nope, I'm not going to be here either day. It's up to you guys.
Well, we hope you're here in the community, even if not at the DS.
Okay. So seeing and hearing no objection to that amendment is adopted. Mr. Klain, will you please provide the wording to the clerk? And Ms. Gray-Jackson, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to say that I really appreciate the concerns of both the Anchorage Daily News and the representative and the Chamber of whatever the newspaper, Journal of Commerce. Thank you. I appreciate your concerns. But you know what? I am personally really, really pleased to see this happening. I thought it should have happened quite some time ago. Technology is really important to help us do our jobs better, period. And I'll tell you something. In 1983, and Jody, you remember this, when I first started working at Transit, I was real familiar with weighing word processors. And Harry Linskins introduced computers, and so we were going to get rid of the word processors and buy computers. And I fought, and we went head to head, both of us. And you know what? I am so glad that Tom Bricken did not listen to me. And with that said, I had a really good conversation with Mr. Baker during the break that kind of took into consideration some of the concerns. And if it's appropriate, Mr. Chairman, I would like for Mr. Baker or someone else from the administration to share those comments with the public. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson. Actually, Ms. Mahoney is next in the queue, and she probably has some information for us that may address your question, Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Yes, I would just like to share some information with you all about online notices. I'd like to first point out that this is certainly not bleeding edge initiative. This is something that is in place in many cities across the United States. Specifically, the cities that we queried just in the Northwest that have complete online notices is Bellingham, Federal Way, Edmonds, Washington, Kent, Pendleton, Oregon, Ashland, Oregon, Hillsboro, Oregon, and then as probably many of you are aware, the state of Alaska went to online publications in 1999. Also, what I'd like to share is that as a result of moving to online publications, of course our goal is to reach as many citizens as we can, but what we would be doing is we would be teaching them to go to one place rather than having to look in multiple newspapers and multiple media sources. They could go to one place. We will have the ability to set up, as Mr. Gutierrez was talking about, the RSS feeds, where they can set up alerts on their email such that they would receive an email, for example, of a notification that would be posted. Also, I wanted to share that we do plan to do a media blitz, if you will, in terms of notifying the public about our move, assuming that this is approved to online publication. The areas that we can focus on in terms of notifying the community is we can do public service announcements, press releases, We can, as the gentleman indicated earlier, announce it on bulletin boards throughout the city and advertise in the newspapers where we currently post these publications. We can post that please in the future begin to go to this website to find this information. And then lastly, I think it's really important for us to realize, as you know, we are a very computer literate state. Based on our surveys, 90% of our households have computers. And then, it's one thing to have computers, but then it's like, how actively are you using it? And one thing that we looked at was our permanent fund dividend application. Of the 90%, how many of them actually use it to, for example, apply for their PFD online? So we talked to the state of Alaska, and 76% of our households actually obtain their PFD and apply online. So that's a real good indication, I think, of the computer usage in this community. And additionally, we are looking to save costs, and this is a real easy cost-saving initiative for us to manage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mahoney. Ms. Gray-Jackson, did that respond to your inquiry sufficiently?
Thank you very much, but not totally.
I didn't hear your question. I didn't hear your question. No.
And I don't mean to put Mr. Baker on the spot, but we had a really nice conversation that, in my opinion, addressed some of the concerns.
Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Please, if you will respond, it would be terrific.
See, the mayor doesn't mind putting you on the spot.
Ms. Gray-Jackson, Mr. Chairman. What would you like me to address?
We had a conversation, and we talked about some of the concerns that the Alaska Journal of Commerce had and the Daily News, and I don't remember exactly what you said, but it was good. Could you repeat it? Thank you.
I think it was what Ms. Mahoney just addressed, that as this conversion takes place, that we do a full public information campaign so that the public knows where they can go to find good access, and that this transition period between now and the 1st of July will actually be, as Mr. Gutierrez knows, and we've talked about, we're going to be going parallel, we're going to be going online, and so that gives us an opportunity to bring the public along and educate them. And I think there's not anybody in this body, and I know anybody in this administration, that doesn't feel that we want to do a better job to inform the public. And I think that the advent of this clearly, as we get to the end of the process, I suspect the numbers are going to be astonishing of how many more of the public actually use this. When we looked at some of the page hits, I think the number was like 500,000 people, and those people that are really concerned about the public, because they're going to the public website also. And besides that, this gives us the option to hyperlink, so that we can actually connect to Channel 2's website or GCI's website or Anchorage Daily News website. This opens the options for us. We're just moving out. And I remember back in 1976 when this ordinance was written, there wasn't the internet then. We're coming into the 21st century. Thank you, Ms. Gray-Jackson.
Just one comment. I really want to thank you and our clerk and all the IT folks for a job well done. I think my colleagues had a preview just like I did, and I'm just really excited about it.
And I also want to pay thanks to the clerk and the clerk's office, because this would not have been possible. Of course, there will be huge beneficiaries, and the clerk obviously serves you and your efforts, but without their assistance, this probably we wouldn't be able to move this initiative along the way we have. And thanks to all of you that took the time to educate yourselves also. Okay? Further questions, Mr. Chairman?
I think you're clear, Mr. Baker.
Off the hook? Thank you.
For now. Oh, sorry. Dr. Selkrieg's got you.
So I have a few questions. First of all, I want to make it clear I'm very happy about using online noticing. My concern is what's the minimum? Assuming, we've all been criticized from time to time for the trust me agreements, right? The Assembly has with the administration. In other words, trust me, everything's going to be fine. And really, in the trust me agreements, you have to look very carefully at what the words say and what the minimum it implies. And the way I read this, the minimum that this implies, assuming another administration is here, and the minimum is implied. It's really our website, the minimum of this, assuming you didn't have an enlightened group of people working on it. Is that true?
That's true. This is the minimum. Just like today, the minimum is 7,000 in the Journal of Commerce. That's the minimum, but that's not what we currently offer. And so this opens it, it opens it all the way up so that this is the baseline. This is the very minimum, not what we necessarily do.
Okay, but the minimum actually would be our website without the Journal of Commerce. I mean, that's the minimum that could come out of this.
That's correct.
That's right. And so, let me just ask you some questions. Are you going to be putting together like a plan? What I would like to see us adopt, and I'm wondering if there's some way we can work together to make that happen, is some minimum standards about what our expectation is in terms of making our information available. I'm very concerned that under a less enlightened group, that we would end up just noticing on the website, and that would be it. And so what I would like to see, and it's hard to do this, and I wish that we had this work that you're going to do in front of us. I'm wondering if we can't set some standards really that says, yes, we're going to go online, but yes, part of going online means that we are going to link with broader networks where people are often viewing those sites. I mean, that's my concern. And so I'm wondering, how are you imagining that happening, or is that what you're imagining to happen?
Ms. Selkirk, I am not the technical person, but I think that as the clerk's office and the administration work together, that's an opportunity as we develop a work plan, and we now have opened the doors and moved into the 21st century, and that those are all, how do we do it, how do we do it most effectively, but those policies and procedures once we have the opportunity to move forward.
Well, is the administration willing to actually, between now and when we implement this, come back to us with the set of policies and procedures that they're going to be proposing for this, so that in some ways we can codify some expectations that exceed just our website over time? In other words, exceed the expectations of just, the 85,000 hits in contrast to the 1.5 million hits. Is there some way that we can weave into this the expectation that we really are committed to linking in effective ways to a broader audience? I guess that might be a bigger question.
Do you want to enter this debate?
Mr. Mayor?
But you raise an interesting point, and quite frankly, it's going to be difficult to develop specific standards. Our goal, at least for the first year, is, I think Mr. Clayman alluded to, is we're going to track data. We're pretty confident that we wouldn't move in this direction if we didn't think it was going to significantly increase exposure to municipal notices. I mean, I think the information that's out there from other locations that have done this clearly prove that that's the result. So, for us to say we're going to hit this target or this target, probably too early to say that, but that doesn't mean that the process shouldn't go forward, and we'll track that data. And then after we establish a baseline, maybe after a year, as Mr. Clayman suggested, we could expect some minimums out of it, but it'd be real hard to codify that, I think. I don't think that would be a wise move at this stage. But.
And so, again, my concern is, I think some of the communities that you mentioned, it's my hunch that they're networked with their local media, their local online media. And I'm wondering if we're making some commitments to make those kind of links in our efforts.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're going to be linking at every conceivable possibility. Right now, I mean, that's what people do. When you've got a site that you want people to read, you link, and we'll be linking.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Chairman?
You're off the hook now, Mr. Baker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Drummond, do you have some comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard Ms. Mahoney hit on it briefly. What I don't see here is a plan. What I see here is a series of things being turned off and sort of a hope that more people will come to the municipality's website, and I don't see what the administration's plan is to drive more visitors to our website. And I think it's a good idea to be measuring these things over the course of the year, but I really would be more comfortable seeing what the plan is to get people to go there.
Thank you, Ms. Drummond. Mr. Coffey?
Something, Mr. Chairman, and it's reflected on the charts that are attached to this, which is on page, hang on a sec, I had it, and of course now I've lost it, taking up everybody's time. My apologies, just a second, Mr. Chairman. Here it is, it's on page 8. It's 291050C. And there's been a typo here. The amendment would add the words school district's website in the place where in a newspaper of general circulation is being deleted. What the typo was, they deleted the newspaper reference but forgot to insert in the school district's website.
Second.
Thank you. So I make that motion, and I'll give the printed document to the clerk, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Coffey. Is there any objection to that amendment? Seeing and hearing none, that amendment is approved. Dr. Selcraig?
I'd like to propose an amendment.
Okay.
I'd like to add Section 4, and I'd like it to state the enactment of this ordinance shall be based on an Assembly-approved public outreach plan that uses online media publications to maximize MOU's public notice. MOA's public notice.
Second.
Everybody get that? Okay, could you please repeat the motion?
The enactment of this ordinance shall be based on an Assembly-approved public outreach plan that uses online media publications to maximize the municipality of Anchorage's public notice. I mean, this is between now and August. I mean, that way we get to see it and we get to comment on it.
Ms. Osiander?
I'm a little bit confused, because it sounds from what I heard as if we have to vote and approve on the plan. So then how do they proceed?
I think we're being promised, basically, that things are going to happen. What I'd like to see is what is going to happen. I'd like that to come back to us. And
could I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Instead, why don't you say in the amendment that a plan will be presented to us within 3 months or 2 months?
All right. I'm glad to revise it. So the enactment of this ordinance shall be based on a public outreach plan that uses online media publications to maximize the municipality of Anchorage's public notice, and that the Assembly will review it in 3 months. Yes.
I would suggest a specific date.
Yeah.
So when is this going to be rolled out in August?
So you know what, guys? Let's take.
Could we do it at ease? And I'll talk
Let's
to her?
take 5 minutes. Thank you.
5 minutes. Okay. One?
Yes.
Okay.
Section 4 I'd like to move that we add a Section 4 that the administration prepare a plan that maximizes MOA public outreach, and that plan be submitted to the Assembly on February 6, 2010. 16th, 2010. And that the Assembly also receive monthly reports indicating the number of hits that we get on our site beginning April 2010.
Would you push a button, Dr. Selcraig? Okay. Thank you. Is there any objection to the amendment?
No.
All right. Seeing and hearing none, that amendment is approved. Ms. Osiander, you're in the queue. Okay. Mr. Coffey? All right. With that, we have the ordinance 2009-134 as amended before us. Is there any objection to approval of that?
Yeah, I just had a question I'd like to have clarified by the administration relative to this. What we have done in many instances in the back pages 1 through 10 is we have deleted reference to the newspapers of general circulation and added language about publication on the website. We know we have contractual obligations that take us till July 1. My question for law or the administration is this. By deleting a reference to the newspapers of general circulation, and by making this ordinance effective immediately, and by referring only to the website, is there any danger of us being precluded from advertising in a newspaper of general circulation with whom we have a contract?
None whatsoever. We still have that ability to do that, but this is the primary method of notification, and we can do anything over and above that.
All right, just for clarity, I believe that to be true, but I wanted it so we didn't get a stumbling block on that. Okay, thank you.
Is there anything further? Is there any objection to approval of this ordinance as amended? Seeing and hearing none, item 2009-134 is approved.
Mr. Chairman?
Ms. Ray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to move to reconsider AO 2009-133S1, and it's only for
Second.
Thank you. It's for the sole purpose of changing the effective date, because and I forgot to do that. The effective date, as passed, says January 1st, and we need to change it to say something different.
What would you say?
So first we need to, well, what I'd say is, well, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I jumped the gun, Ms.
That's okay, thank you.
Is there any objection to taking up reconsideration at this time? Okay, we are under reconsideration.
Thank you.
Ms. Ray Jackson.
I move to change Section 3 to read, "The ordinance shall be effective immediately upon passage and approval."
Second.
Is there any objection to that amendment? Mr. Coffey.
Now I have another matter.
Okay. Seeing and hearing no objection, that amendment is adopted. The once again amended ordinance is back before us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there any objection to approval of the ordinance as amended? Seeing and hearing none, that is approved. Mr. Coffey.
Mr. Chairman, I move immediate reconsideration of AO 2009-134.
Second.
The purpose of my motion is because there's fiscal considerations associated with the budget. We need to have certainty around this, so I would hope we would vote no on reconsideration. Thank you.
Is everybody inclined to vote yes on reconsideration? Seeing and hearing no one, that we are not going to reconsider 2009-134. Moving ahead to item 14A, ordinance number 2009-140, an ordinance amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 3.88, to extend the time period for the pre-funding investment program, to update administrative responsibilities and delete outdated references. I'd like to open the public hearing on this matter. Is there anyone who wishes to come talk to us about this? Please come down. Seeing everyone fleeing the room, the public hearing is now closed. Is there debate? Is there objection? Seeing and hearing none, that ordinance is now approved. Item 14B, ordinance 2009-141, an ordinance authorizing a non-exclusive landscape easement within East Northern Lights Buffer Park within Tract A, Block 3 of the College Heights subdivision, plat number P483. Thank you. Is there anybody who wishes to speak to us? The public hearing is now open. Seeing a few more people flee the room, the public hearing is now closed. Oh, Mr. Birch had to hang up, and he is now excused. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
There.
Thank you. Is there any objection to approval of item 14B? Seeing and hearing none, that item is approved. Item 14C is before us, an ordinance authorizing a non-exclusive electrical and telecommunications easement across a portion of Tract 3, Municipal Tudor Road Complex.
Waive reading.
Thank you. The public hearing on this matter is now open. If you wish to speak to us about this easement, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, that public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Is there objection? Seeing and hearing none, that item is approved. Item 14D, ordinance 2009-139, an ordinance of the Anchorage Assembly amending the zoning map and providing for the rezoning of approximately 6.51 acres from R4 SL, special limitations, to R0 SL, and I1 to PLI, Public Lands Institutions District, and RO SL, and R4 SL.
Waive reading.
Thank you. Public hearing on this matter is now open. I can already see Mr. Potter is making rounds. Whenever you're ready, sir, we'll be happy to hear from you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Assembly, my name is Tim Potter with Dow HKM, representing the city tonight. And I'm actually glad to tell you that we're almost at the culmination of a very long neighborhood traffic engineering and kind of neighborhood management shuffle. And as many of you know, around the Northwood Elementary School, the Spenard Rec Center, the Montessori School, and the residential area is a direct mixture of industrial heavy truck traffic, including two-axle tractor-trailer and tractor with double-trailer distribution-type trucking. And for a long time, the community has been working towards a solution to separate the industrial traffic, the heavy truck traffic, from the residential area and coming in between the sports field and the school and the Spenard Rec Center. So effectively, the road between the ball fields and the rec center was the primary drive for these tractor-trailer rigs to come down. So with a lot of hard work by the city, a former assembly person, now mayor, Sullivan, and other assembly people, and PM&E working with the neighborhood, the Spenard Community Council is in full support of the proposed rezone. I've handed out a number of pages, and what I can tell you is that it's not as complicated as it looks. And there's been an awful lot of work done, so Ms. Selcraig, please trust me. There. And I do remember when FM first came out. It was KOL FM in Seattle. The third map in the 4 pages I handed out shows you what the existing zoning is right now. And as you can see, there's a mixture. In fact, the city's own soccer field is RO and I1, which really doesn't make a lot of sense either. And what happens in the rezone, we actually shuffle properties around in trading land and land value, and then accommodating some rezones, so that we actually consolidate the public improvements and the public infrastructure together, and we take and move the access for the heavy trucks to the east side coming through the industrial property, so it's fully enclosed within the industrial complex. We take a little bit of R4 property away that used to be zoned industrial, now R4SL, and we consolidate a larger piece of industrial property close to the airport and the interchange of Minnesota and Tudor, which is a good truck route, and enlarge it a little bit. So with this rearrangement, the rezone that we're doing tonight gets the properties to the appropriate zoning so that they can be used in an effective and efficient manner. And now this allows the truck traffic to come in to the east side of the Spenard Rec Center, and will also pull the trucks associated with the school district's warehouse building and distribution building there to the east side of that as well. So that gets the ASD truck traffic out of the rec center parking lot as well. So the outcome is the soccer field will be utilized for parking and for part of enlarging the industrial area. The owners of the R4 property then will be giving up or trading R4 land that will then be rezoned to PLI. And what you end up with is what is shown on the ultimate map on the cover, that all in green is what the city's holdings will be, and the rest will then be rezoned to appropriate zoning so that everything works. Now, we worked for a long time with the Spenard Community Council, and as you know, they're extremely organized, very active and vocal. They have passed a resolution in support. We had to go to the Parks and Rec Commission because You will see in the coming week or so an action to get utilization of dedicated parkland out of the public ownership realm of the dedicated park status so that it can be traded around, and then you'll be rededicating parkland once the trade is done. So this gets the sidewalks and the pedestrian circulation in the neighborhood and the homes separated from the heavy industrial traffic and puts things together in a better package that ultimately leads to a better, more livable neighborhood, maintains industrial property, maintains the park, and actually consolidates it in a better form. With that, I'd be happy to answer your questions. If you'd like a description of the drawings in more detail, I have large boards. I can point to things and that. The thing that we would ask that has changed a little bit from the ordinance that's come forward is that Section 3, which says special limitations, which requires that buffer landscaping shall be required on the I-1SL parcel where it adjoins the PLI land. The city has confirmed that where the city owns property, they'll be responsible for landscaping associated with that plan as it goes through the Parks and Rec Commission and P&Z, and that the industrial property will be responsible for their landscaping on their side as well when it's all said and done. And I think this results in a fair approach to doing that rather than hoisting and foisting all of the responsibility on the industrial property.
Thank you.
So with that, I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. Dr. Selcraig.
First of all, I don't have to trust you because you gave me a plan. But I actually want to compliment you. This is highly complex, and some people would think that it would be impossible to actually do this, and so I'm really pleased and appreciative of what's before us. I just wanted some clarification on the SL that you just referenced. Specifically, could you state how you believe that should be changed? Or if it should be,
I would simply delete it.
Delete it
And let the plan reviews that are done through Planning and Zoning and Parks and Recreation Commission.
Will automatically require the buffering on the industrial. Okay.
That's correct, as will the I-1.
Okay, so. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Selcraig. Ms. Osiander.
Good plan. One question. Don't we have to involve the voters if we're getting rid of dedicated parkland?
If you could run that by me one more time.
Well, my understanding is to divest or get rid of dedicated parkland, even if we plan to rededicate other land. We need the voters.
You will see an ordinance coming forward next week, I believe, for introduction so that it is done in time or can be in front of you in time for action to be on the ballot in April.
There you go. Thanks, Sue.
So that is coming right behind this, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't hear the ballot part. That was all.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Osiander. Ms. Drummond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Potter. You have clarified this entire process in 4 sheets of paper, as opposed to the quarter of an inch of paper that we have here. I would never have understood it if you hadn't displayed it, even though I've been watching the process at the Spenard Community Council for the last couple of years. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Well, it's been very nice to deal with a very involved assembly, even since Mayor Sullivan's time, and continuing on through. It's a very active community council that's been good. Project management, engineering, and the planning department have been very supportive. So please don't give me all the credit tonight because I don't deserve it. But do trust me. Okay.
Thanks.
And Mr. Klayman.
Just to make sure when folks in the community may ask as it moves forward, the end plan at this point still doesn't include any through route for the trucks. The trucks are basically going to parking lot and warehouses at the end of the road now, even under the modification.
The route will come in, and effectively their parking lot will become the turnaround area for American Fast Freight and the Anchorage School District, and then they can exit back out to the east, and their truck route then routes them back out by Spenard Builders, which is a truck route, and back to the Minnesota-Tudor intersection.
So even if there's development in the future in what is labeled on page 1, the Crossroads Business Park subdivision, that wouldn't be developed for truck traffic per se?
That's correct.
That would be offices, hotels?
That is R4SL. There are design requirements. There's that was part of an earlier interesting land trade that resulted in this land being changed from industrial to residential in cooperation with the community council. And there's a limit of having up to 225 residential units on that, but there is a listing of uses and there's a listing of prohibited uses. It does require a site plan review, whatever goes forward. So I would envision it to be probably residential in nature.
Okay, thank you. There appear to be no further questions, Mr. Potter. Thank you very much. Anybody else who wishes to speak on this matter? For Mr. Potter? Okay. Nice try, Tim.
I just went over to Mr. Wheeler and I said, Mr. Wheeler, what happens if the voters say no? And so he showed me that section that said that this is only effective, let's see, on page, the effective clause only become effective when the exchange of land is entered into. So I'm going to ask you the same question. If the voters say no, when does the exchange of land, the interplay between the vote and this is confusing for me.
The phase 1 part of the project, which does not rely on really the land trade and the rezone, would go forward. The actual then rezone, land trade, and all that really can't happen until the voters have acted in a positive action. There are appraisals being done now. The paperwork's getting ready, so it will be pending, and the deal will be done after the voters speak.
So just sequence it for me. The stop point, the rezone will become effective only when the land exchange occurs, but the land exchange will occur prior to the vote?
No, after.
Subsequent. Okay. I just question if it's clear enough here, but if it's stated on the record and everybody agrees, then I guess we're okay.
Right.
Is that concurring, Mr. Weaver? Okay.
The exchange cannot become effective until the voters take an action.
Very good.
So, I believe everybody's covered.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Once again, is there anybody else who wishes to speak to us on this matter? Seeing and hearing no one, the hearing is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve the item before us with the exclusion of Section 3.
Second.
Why don't we do a motion to approve and then an amendment to delete Section 3?
That's fine.
Please.
Move to approve.
Mr. Drummond, are you seconding?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We have the ordinance 2009-139 before us. Ms. Selkirk, Dr. Selkirk, do you have an amendment?
Yes, I'd like to amend the item before us to exclude Section 3 special limitations.
So that'd be deleting lines 8 through 13 on page 2?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any questions or?
I actually do. I'd like to hear from Mr. Weaver.
Mr. Chairman, Dr. Selkirk, Chair Weaver, yes, we concur with that amendment. We have a written agreement from the former city manager agreeing to providing that landscaping requirement on the municipal property in the future.
Okay, thank you.
With that, is there any further discussion on the amendment? Is there objection to the amendment? Oh, Mr. Mayor, do you, on that? Okay. Seeing and hearing no objection, that amendment is approved and the ordinance is back before us as amended. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This really is the culmination of a decade of work. In 1999, when I was first elected to the Assembly, this matter came before us, and as Mr. Potter mentioned, a lot of people have spent an awful lot of time over a decade to try and get to this point. And, you got private landowners there who weren't particularly anxious to give up their private land, and you've got a community need that was certainly pressing. And so I just want to thank everybody involved, and I hope the Assembly will concur with Mr. Potter's recommendation. This really is a great solution, long time coming, and again, thanks everybody who worked on it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are there any further comments? Are there any objections? With that, this matter is approved, and we are on to item 14E. This is a resolution, AR 2009-305, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, accepting 6 State of Alaska Clean Water Fund loan agreements in the aggregate amount of $20,374,000. Public hearing on this matter is now open. If you wish to come speak to us, please come on down. Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing on this matter is approved. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any objection to the motion?
I haven't.
Mr. Coffey, sorry, you're in the...
It just keeps piling on, you know? I mean, we're over several $100 million with this, aren't we? I mean, every week, every assembly meeting, here's 20, 50, 100. I don't know if I should be worried or just think, I wish I could do this. One of the two.
Through the chair, Mr. Coffey, these are loans for projects that are already built. These are like lines of credit. This defers the need for the utility to go out and find alternate sources of funding, i.e. revenue bonds. These loans are offered at very attractive rates of interest relative to the bond market even now. So they are actually saving ratepayers substantial sums of money. We pay them back through rates paid by our customers. The aggregate amount...
Thanks. I'm sorry. I thought it was on. Go ahead. Aggregate amount.
The aggregate amount of the loans are listed in the resolutions themselves. I believe for item 14E, it's about $21 million.
No. I can read yeah, I got that. I mean, the weekly increments that we approve. Do you know what we owe altogether?
No, I don't have that off the top of my head.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Starr. Dr. Selkirk.
Don't we pay these loans back based on customers that are actually being added to the service and paying into the service? I mean, what's the strategy for, following up on Mr. Coffey's question, could you provide the strategy for paying the $20 million back?
Yes, Ms. Selkirk.
Thank you.
The way it's paid back is every ratepayer that makes a payment to the utility contributes a portion of that payment to repay both the principal and the interest on these loans, much as any ratepayer would pay were we to use revenue bonds to finance these improvements. It's exactly the same mechanism.
And so would we anticipate continual increases in the cost of our rates as a result of these?
Actually, there would be less of a rate impact because there is less cost to service the debt than there would be if we used an alternate source of funds where we went into debt.
Thank you.
Seeing and no one else, you're off the hook, sir. Is there any objection to passage of this resolution? Seeing and hearing none, that resolution 2009-305 is approved. We're on to item 14F, AR number 2009-306, another resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, accepting 6 State of Alaska Drinking Water Fund loan agreements in the aggregate amount of just $4.9 million. Public hearing on this matter is now open. If you wish to come speak with us about this matter, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, public hearing is now closed.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any objection to approval of this matter?
What's the point?
Well said, Mr. Coffey. Okay, with that, this matter is approved. Moving on to item 14G, resolution number AR 2009-299, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $507,250 from master tax-exempt lease proceeds. Thank you. This is the Hansen system, a new module. Public hearing on this matter is now open. If you wish to speak to us on this, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, by the way, it's not the GRC
Move to approve.
module. Okay. The public hearing is now closed.
Move to approve.
Is there any objection to approval? Seeing and hearing none, that item is approved. Moving on to item 14H, AR 2009-300, a resolution of Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $144,765 from the State of Alaska DOT and appropriating $42,443 as a contribution from the 2009.
Waive reading.
Thank you. This is for law enforcement equipment and traffic enforcement straight time response. The public hearing on this matter is now open. If you wish to speak to us about this matter, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed.
Move to approve.
Second.
Is there any objection to this matter? Seeing and hearing none, that matter is approved, which brings us to item 14I, Resolution 2009-301, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage adopting Substantial Amendment Number 1 and Substantial Amendment Number 2 to the Housing and Community Development 2010 Action Plan for the Department of Neighborhoods. The public hearing on this matter is now open. If you wish to come speak to us, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Is there any objection to approval of this matter? Seeing and hearing none, item 14I is approved. 14J, a resolution 2009-302, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $200,000 from the Girdwood Valley Service Area Operating Budget, Fund 106, to pay the...
Reading.
Thank you. This is an interphone loan for development of the Girdwood Community Center and Library. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Public hearing is now open. Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body? Thank you. Second. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Is there any objection to approval of this matter? Okay, seeing and hearing none, item 14J is approved. Item 14K, Resolution AR 2009-303, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating $135,354. This is for salmon habitat outreach and education. If you wish to speak to us on this matter, the public hearing is now open. Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed. What is the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Is there any objection? Seeing and hearing none, item 14K is approved. Item 14L is before us, Resolution 2009-304, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating a Federal Transit Administration section.
Waive reading, Mr. Chairman. It's a long title.
I at least have to say it's $289,394. This is for transit planning. Anyone who wishes to speak to us on this matter, please come forward. Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed. What is the wish? Item's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Any objection? Seeing and hearing none, the matter is approved. Item 14M, Assembly Resolution 2009-308, a resolution of the Municipality of Anchorage appropriating an amount not to exceed $595,000 from the Area-wide General Fund to the Area-wide CIP Fund for payment of interest on an interfund loan from Municipal Light and Power. Anyone who wishes to speak to us, you may. The public hearing is now open. Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed.
Move to approve.
Is there any discussion on the matter? Mr. Coffey.
Yeah, I spoke to the mayor earlier because I talked to Mr. Posey earlier yet, and I asked, they were planning a land swap between Centennial Park, where they used to have the RV park, and this property here that ML&P gave us a loan on. And I guess that's still in the works from the information I have. The Centennial Park property is owned by the city, and it's adjacent to Plant 2, so it probably makes sense. So the questions that I have now, I guess for the administration, is what's happened? Why are we paying this if $595,000 now, if that's in the works? And if not, why wasn't it paid earlier? Or what's the situation today?
I'll address that through the chair. When we've been going through and looking at some of the liabilities that hadn't been previously disclosed, this is one of them that was revealed to us. And what we learned is that the interest expense associated with this loan was paid in 2006. However, it was not budgeted or paid in 2007, 2008, or 2009. So what we've decided to do is go in and catch up on this interest expense and get it paid to ML&P. ML&P has been recording the interest expense as accrued revenue on their income statement, and we've just left it in our balance sheet and had not been recording it as a liability. So in light of transparency and wanting to get this cleaned up, we decided to send this forward to you to appropriate the money to pay the expense.
The ML&P gave us some money to buy that land on Muldoon Road by Muldoon and DeBar.
Right.
And that was a loan, right?
That's correct.
And what you're telling us is that we paid whatever interest it was in 2006, and this $595,000 represents unpaid interest on a loan for 3 years?
That's correct.
Oh, well, okay. But now it's going to get paid.
That's correct.
Is the swap still on?
Yes, it is.
All right, thank you.
Dr. Selkirk.
I'm just curious, does this have any impact at all on the swap in terms of the resources available for the discussion about the swap?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions? on
Yeah,
that?
I have one other. Have you
ahead.
got any other of these coming to us? Similar undisclosed or unpaid obligations over years, or is this the end of it, or do you know yet?
Well, we've asked the directors of the departments to make all their disclosures to us this month, and I still have disclosures filtering in, and I'm still assessing them.
Are there any others that you've got that aren't in front of us yet? I mean, if you know, I don't want to take all night on it. It just bothers me.
Nothing that I want to. Nothing that I have all the
All right,
facts at
thank
this
you.
time.
If you're ready on this, I'm done. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Is there any objection to approval of this item? Seeing and hearing none, item 14M is approved, which brings us to 14N, Resolution 2009-312, a resolution in Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Resolution 2009-242, a resolution in Municipality of Anchorage approving the 2010 to 2015 General Government Capital Improvement Program from Dr. Selkirk. The public hearing on this matter is now open. Does anybody wish to come testify on it? Seeing and hearing no one, the public hearing is now closed. Dr. Selkirk.
I'd like to postpone this indefinitely.
Postpone this indefinitely. Is there any objection to indefinite postponement? Seeing, Mr. Coffey, could you please press your button? Seeing and hearing none, this item is postponed indefinitely. I know we have at least one person interested in audience participation, so we are at that point in our agenda. Madam, if you wish to come down and speak to us, anyone in the general public who wishes to speak to us is welcome to do so at this time.
Okay. I haven't done this before, and so I'm a little...
Go ahead and
about
pull
it.
the microphone down. It'll be a little easier for you. You get 3 minutes to say whatever you'd like.
3 minutes? I can say I always trusted government until I had to go and vote in a church. And then I stopped trusting government.
Okay, your name?
And that's a sad commentary because I know that there are enough schools in this community that there's no need to vote in a church.
I'm sorry, could you state your name for the record? I apologize.
My name is Carla Utter.
Okay, thank you.
I live in the downtown area, and I've been riding the bus for the last 6 months. I'm going to say I'm a privileged individual. Except for 2 years in college, I've always owned a car. And in America and Alaska, that's, it's a privilege. You live in Europe, you don't own a car. A lot of people don't own cars because they have great public transit. And I have always assumed we had good public transit in this state because I'd never heard anybody complain about it before. But now that I've been doing it for 6 months and walking the streets on top of it, I have to say I'm extremely disappointed. And I would challenge each and every one of you to do it for 14 days, just 2 weeks. You try and get from place A to B using public transit in the middle of the wintertime. Those sidewalks are not shoveled appropriately. They're not benches at more than half the places. There's no weather protection at any of the bus stops except for the Transit Center and Diamond Center that I'm aware of. And I'm disgusted that we're the richest state in the nation and we provide so little to people who are underprivileged, one, and to visitors, two. So I just really had to bring that up. To top it off, you can't read half of the signs because it's too dark, they're not lit, and they're printed too small for most people to read. So I came up because I feel like I had to say that. I know that this summer there was somebody talking about the fact that the bus service was to be canceled for a few days, and in the summertime, you just walk and ride a bus. I didn't really think much of it, but if you had a job, I can see that it would be a real challenge. But I would challenge any one of you to do it for 14 days and tell me that you think we have an adequate bus system for the community. We're trying to promote community transit, for decreasing, wasting gas, and getting kids and people who don't have driver's license. And I do have a driver's license, I just don't happen to drive. So that was my first complaint. My second complaint was, while I was walking, and this is just today, I walked by the courthouse. There were 4 police cars in a row, empty. All 4 of them, the engines were running, and the police officers were in the courthouse. And I cannot imagine how much gas gets wasted. 2 weeks ago, I was walking another location, and I saw 2, and they were going into their dry cleaning store to get dry cleaning, and I was stunned that they would leave cars running.
Your 3 minutes are up, but there's a question from Ms. Gray Jackson, if you...
Yes, actually, it's not a question. I just want to thank you for coming out and talking about bus service in particular, because I'm an avid supporter of bus service in this community, and I rode the bus for 21 years. Not 14 days, 21 years.
I'm sorry, you've been riding the bus for 21 years?
Yeah, I haven't for the past 7, but 21 of the 28 years I lived in this town, I rode the bus. I feel your pain. Thank you.
Well, when I see people in the cold, and I'm just amazed. And then I know my time is up, but I want to say that there needs to be 1, better noise ordinance, and 2, enforcement of noise ordinances.
Thank you. And Dr. Selcraig also has a question.
I'm sorry, Carl, I'm grateful that you took the time to come out tonight, because I think there are lots of people who ride the bus who don't have the capacity because they're working or because their lives are so full to be in this room to remind us of what needs to be done. And it's clear that we have a substandard bus system in this city and that we are way behind other cities our size. And so I think it's good that you took the time to come and remind us. And the noise ordinance is kind of laying around. It's something that both Ms. Drummond and I have talked about, and I think that we'll probably be working on that in the next couple months. So thanks for reminding us about that. And also I have to say your mother would be very proud of you tonight.
Well, she might have said you could have gotten a haircut wearing different clothes, but, it's cold out there.
Thank you for coming down, Ms. Utter. All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Osiander. Is there any objection? Hearing and seeing none, thank you, everyone. Happy New Year.